he couldn't be here today, but you get him tomorrow for the displacement work that we've been conducting now for about a year. So I hope you can make that lunch as well. I will just ask you, if you're not interested in this and you want to talk with the people at your table, I would ask you to just go outside. I don't mean to be rude, but I'd just like to be able to get through this, considering we're already 5 minutes late. So the title of this presentation is Waste Management and End-of-Life ITNs. And these are the preliminary results. I'm going to present first, and then we're going to have two presenters giving you an overview of some of the end-of-life net proof of concept work that's been happening in Nigeria. But a lot of this, what I really am looking for is I want to set the stage for some of the work that's been done, some of the work that will happen, and then open it up with a mentee to get your recommendations on some of your constraints as you see them in your own context, whether you be a donor, you represent a country, you're an implementing partner. It would be really great to get your input so that we can make our plans for the end of 2023 and also 2024. One thing I'd like to note is that if you'd have seen these slides yesterday morning, you would have seen really heavy, deep slides, which I'm going to try and avoid presenting, but they're still very wordy and have a lot of graphics. So I'm going to slip through a number of them and then really focus on the ones that I think are going to be interesting to you, knowing that you will get the detailed slides of the work that's been done. One other thing before I start is, while there was some undertaking on durability within our online questionnaire. How do you move that forward? Oh, thank you. Oh, so not really. Oh, there it goes. While we were included some questions on durability, this is not the time to talk about durability. Hannah is going to present on some of that work. I've given her all of the data, and there's another time for that discussion. So if we could just remember that, please. So just to open up the presentation, I mean, these are the pictures we love seeing, right? We love seeing women and children under nets, using nets. And this is really what this group of collective partners is all about. But we have a slight problem. As was pointed out earlier, in 2022 alone, 191 million nets were delivered to endemic countries. If you do some rough back of the envelope maps or calculations, it's around 100 metric tons of plastic being delivered to endemic countries. So we believe that the environmental impact of ITN distribution has mandated an additional review of discussion. And as I said earlier, your engagement is essential to the operational guidance and our activities that need to be developed. So this is also part of the problem. I've taken some of these pictures myself. We see collection of PET bottles in nets. We see use on in agriculture. We see bags burned. And so we also think that the plastic has value. So there ought to be a way in which we can think about the environmental and carbon impact of this plastic going into Africa, while we also maintain our approach to protecting vulnerable and most at-risk populations. So in 2022, AMP requested NMPs to respond to an online questionnaire relating to waste management and ITN policies and procedures. And lo and behold, 23 responses from 15 countries. And you'll see, I hope you can see, I tried to make it really stand out that we also got responses from out of Africa. So Nicaragua, Haiti, Bangladesh, Timor-Leste. But then you see all the ones, I think you all know your African geography, so I won't go into that either. So we're very happy with some of the data that we got. And so out of those replies, you can see that some of them are senior operations people, National Malaria Control Program leads. I won't go into that, but then also we asked who their donors were, right? So majority being the Global Fund, we have PMI, we have national governments, we have philanthropic organizations, we have AMF, and we have UNICEF. So just to give you kind of a stage setting on that. So AMP also undertook a key informant interview. And just to let you know that those are some of the findings from the KIIs, and the quotes are embedded in this presentation. And you can see the countries listed there as well. Thank you to Pakistan for also responding and being part of the KII process. And then you can see in the word cloud what was discussed. So nets, of course, management of packaging, private sector engagement, and routine distribution, and the like. So we asked the question about plastic bans. Does your country have regulations or bans in place for the importation of plastic bans? So I was quite surprised, because when we did kind of a desk review of plastic bans in sub-Saharan Africa in 2020, we showed that 29 countries actually had some sort of ban or policy on plastic that impacted the supply and procurement of ITNs. So I think we need to probably dig a little deeper in there. And so that would be also nice to pull out on the Menti today. And this is just examples of some of the ones that do. Burundi has one. Rwanda, of course, we know Kenya does, and I apologize for not having Kenya on the map. And then we have Guinea-Bissau, and of course, Cameroon, and they go on. So another thing we wanted to understand is the awareness and use of WHO waste management policies. I think most people did, although that you can see in the bottom left, one country said, no, we're not aware of any policies. We're trying to request for these policies unsuccessfully. So I think that leads it up to us to kind of push these out a bit more. But you can see that the main type of adherence to WHO's waste management guidance is incineration. Then it goes to burying the packages, and then it pit burning, and it goes on and on. So we at least know that there is some awareness of that. So for incineration, I think we're quite clear that most countries have incinerators. The question is, do they actually comply with the guidance of reaching the temperature of 850 to 1200? It was nice to see that, yes, they were, but 5 said they were at regional level, 3 noted national, and 2 noted district. Others had said that it was only in the hospitals and it was basically medical waste. So I think, you know, it's a good thing to kind of dig on each country level. Plastic recycling, this was another one I thought was I'd go through quickly. Yes, there are recycling facilities in the country. Is it an option? Yes. So that's great. That's something that we can move on. So for specifications specifically, it's also really gratifying to see that the National Malaria Control Programs, elimination programs are setting the specifications for ITNs in the country, and also for the specifications of the packaging as well. We have some little quotes there that you can see. You could probably read by yourself. I don't need to do that. But I think that it was rather interesting to see that, well, not everyone thought that that was the case as it relates for packaging or ITNs for that matter. For distribution, the channels you see there, they're all that you know. And with individual packages distributed through any channel, it was quite a resounding yes, that bags are still part of the distribution process. Also specifically there was almost even on bags and bulk packaging for mass campaigns. Then I think I just want to, on this slide specifically as it relates to the type of packaging, I think at this point, or I believe I should say, that most countries and most of the procuring agencies have switched away from OXO biodegradable bags. There is evidence to show that they actually, in certain instances, that they actually degrade while in warehousing and that they affect the nets. So I think it's interesting to note that there's still a mix that includes them, and that's something that should be looked at. And then, of course, we know that between standard bags and biodegradable bags, real biodegradable bags, that they are more expensive. So probably why most are still just standard plastic. And then as it relates to other there, that's really bulk packaging, so it really doesn't apply. I won't spend time on this other than to say we all know that having individual bags does increase cost. If we bulk package, it's lower cost. And then that within those that are packaged are the packaging specifications met by suppliers, and that was like nice to see that. Yes, that was the answer. So I don't think any of you will be surprised by this slide, which is budgeting for waste management. I imagine that with the past envelopes and the current envelopes coming up, those budgets are pretty tight. We know that generally. And that there are not always budgets to be able to look and develop waste management plans and actually implement waste management. So, of course, the no's were basically funding is the problem. But yes, you can see that some is collected at distribution point and hub and then transport to a health facility or point of incineration and or mapping of incinerator locations. So there are some good examples of some budgets, but I think it's not in line with a full waste management plan. And then how the ITN waste is managed at the point of distribution during ITNs. It's transported. It's either taken at the DP and then transported later. It's either left at distribution point to lowest location, or it's transported and burned or other. So for 50%, plastic packaging, bale, and other waste is retained. And then for the 37.5, plastic packaging is sent to households, with net recipients and bale and other waste retained at distribution for later management. With that, this is just a quick one on routine. So no, waste management plans are not developed or budgeted for routine. And that it's also given to the health facility. So as it relates to the household packaging management, one thing I think is important, there's almost an even split on distributed to recipients for management at household level, but when it is distributed to the household level, we can see that it's either discarded in the environment or disposed as household waste. But then it's significant to show that it's burned and that is reused. And I think most of you in the room know that both of those things are not according to what we would recommend. So this brings me to end-of-life nets. What are households doing with end-of-life nets? We know RBM has repurposing guidelines. We know that there are some really good ways of repurposing nets in a neutral way, which is put it in the eaves, make screens, that sort of thing. But you can see that 75% of the people who responded are the countries. They're using it for protecting plants. Then they use it in eaves, which is nice, as I said, but then there's also for animal protection. And then we go down to being left in the environment and then also for burning. So I think this is something that we need to really understand a bit more what households are doing. And it goes to the discussion on behavior change and how to change behaviors of those types of behaviors. And then it was nice to see that over 50% agreed the collection of unserviceable or end-of-life nets is important. But most countries who replied do not have policies in place or collect end-of-life nets. And we do know that there are some examples. I'm looking at Chris Warren, who did some work in Ghana. There's some work happening in Nigeria. There's some work happening in Sierra Leone and other countries. So I'm not too, there are some good examples of that. So some of the, I won't go into this. This is, at least it's not small. So I'm happy that it's not small on the screen. But we do have coming out of the KII on waste management, some recommendations. And so that leads me into the next one. So it's now Menti time. I hope you've all finished eating and that I didn't speak too quickly for the translators. If I did, sorry. If I can ask you to get out your phones with your little camera readers, there's the QR code. If not, if you want to do it on your computer, there is the code. And then I think I have to start it on my computer. So give me a second. Yeah, I do. Oriane, can you come help me? Yeah, you need the adapter. Sorry, I had a lack of communication on this process. My fault. There we go. Okay. So what constraints do you face managing waste associated with ITN distribution? The code's at the top. Huh? It would be nice if you would. Okay. Can everyone get in? Or would you rather take this as questions? Is everyone in? Really? I appreciate that. Where's the other one? Yeah, okay. Yeah, can you do? No, the problem is it's not letting people actually asking them to put questions in. Do you know how to fix that? Can you? So what do you want? You want to? No, I want them to answer the question. Yeah. That's what I thought I was going. Okay, so then it needs to be open and now. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, I think we're getting there. Sorry. I'm a Menti input newbie. Patrick, is it working? Okay, we need to go back to the previous one. Yep, okay. So we have the issue with incineration. No guidelines in place to guide the process. Environmental risk. Budget and plans lacking. Volumes, yep, volumes are big. Incineration again, then we have budgets. Cost of the collection, good point. Personal protection. Decentralizations, we go back to guidance again. Can you move it up, Elisa? Thank you. Funding the waste management process, getting distribution teams to properly organize waste, lack of budgets, identifying private sector partners and opportunities. And we know there is private sector in each country that have this. Absence of clear guidelines again. Limited biodegradable packaging. Okay. Marcy, should we move on? Yeah. Okay, can we go to the next one? Okay. Can we show the answers? What constraints do you face in the management of end-of-life ITNs? Packaging of waste at the waste station for a longer period. Ozone destruction, I don't understand that one. No guidance again in communication strategy, plastic pieces in the community. Defining and identifying what is EOL. So just to that point, we have an exclusion criteria for end-of-life nets that we're happy to share. It's a suggestion that we're using in Nigeria. Accountability, system of pulling them to central, and of course, allocated budgets for that. Lack of enough awareness to community members, no guidance, communication strategy, no guideline, community knowledge. Is everyone gone that's interested in going? Technology for processing. Yeah. How to coordinate the collection. So with that, I would just say, I think the best way to coordinate that collection is pulling them back at the time of campaign or routine or continuous. Maha.
Just one thing I think is missing, because collection from the areas in the community required another process and budget.
You're doing it
While we are, but there are some areas, it's not on the same time. So budget should be added.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the last question, and then I'd like to ask Godwin and Fati to come up, please. Thanks. Okay, what are areas we should be targeting for further assessment in 2023 and 24? Sorry, I had a typo there. What do you think, based on what I presented and the results of the last two questions, should be further targeted for assessment in 2023-24, please? I think I limited that to 3 answers. Anyone? Or are we just not showing results? Huh? Oh, okay. Policy guidelines, agree. Actually, they would be operational guidelines, but reverse logistics, proof of concepts, no cost operational model. Ask the users. Engaging community. Data is always good. Assessment of CD, waste management, repurposing, recycling, funding seems to be coming out pretty strong. Net durability, which I'm not touching. efficacy of logistics, net redemption, biodegradable products. Thank you very much, everyone. So within that introduction I made, I have Godwin and Fati from Nigeria, who are going to be presenting on Nigeria's end of life ITN proof of concept. And I'm going to hand it over to Godwin now. Thank you, Godwin.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jessica, for setting the tone for our presentation. My task here is very simple. I'll just give you snippets of evidence-based approaches for the management of end-of-life nets, a small project in Nigeria. Last year, around April, a scoping study was conducted to find out the perceptions of households, their behaviors and attitudes regarding old or end-of-life nets. Well, there were issues about definitions, but I think we have gone past that right now. The next slides provide snippets of some of the findings from that. Okay. So this is just, in 2 slides, I'll try to present the findings of the scoping study. First, ITNs were found in almost all the households in sizable numbers. The project took place in, the study took place in Cross River State in Nigeria. Cross River was selected because of the long history of net distributions through campaigns, through school distribution, so they have a good history of ITN distribution. And the likelihood of finding old nets was quite high in Cross River State. So that's why it was selected for the study. So on the average, they were in every household about 1 to 2 nets, depending on the size of the household. And about 76% of the nets were 3 years and above in age. The last mass campaign in Cross River was in 2019. And a current campaign is ongoing. That is 4 years after the last campaign. And then 60% of the household had end-of-life nets that were no longer used for malaria prevention. So households were no longer sleeping under the nets. In terms of perception generally about willingness, about the value or not of end-of-life nets, 55% of households indicated that they will not use what they perceive to be old, ineffective ITNs for malaria prevention, but they mostly still kept this end-of-life within end-of-life nets within the household. And about 79% of households were willing to actually give up these end-of-life nets. Conditionally, however, some 54% of the households were willing to give up their end-of-life net if it was replaced with a new net. So there was a conditional factor there. Generally, the finding was, indicated that there was lack of environmental awareness about most households, considering the practices of, managing end-of-life nets like burning and the rest of them. They obviously were not too aware about the environmental application of such disposal methods. So the 1.4% of households were not aware of any negative environmental consequences of the end-of-life nets. Then we also look at the recoverability of the nets. And based on the sample local government areas, we actually sampled 3 local government areas in the state. We found out that it was possible to retrieve or collect or recover end-of-life nets from about 60% of the households, because in 6 out of 10 households, we actually found these nets available. And at least 50% of the last campaign nets, 2019 nets, we thought was a modest assessment of what could be available for retrieval. And they also look at potential operational and logistic challenges of the retrieval process to include access to households. I think a few weeks ago, we actually went to the field to conduct a microplan for the proof of concept. We had identified some distribution points where we hope to collect these end-of-life nets. We found out that one of the DPs was actually inaccessible. We were able to get halfway by vehicle. We checked the other way. So in terms of recoverability, you have to consider all those factors. Then funding for collection was an issue, and then there were also issues about warehousing, transportation to the destination for incineration or recycling. So the objective, the next step, therefore, was to conduct a proof of concept, having found out all this, to go back to the field and find out if this concept we are propounding has a proof in theory. So I'd like to invite Fatih to give us some snippets of the steps we had followed for the proof of concept. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Fatima. I'm from NMEP, Nigeria. So Mr. Godwin has taken you through the findings and how valuable this process is and the likelihood of its success. So I'm just going to take you through the steps of the proof of concept. Scoping study was conducted in Cross River State to understand the perceptions and attitudes. So those were the results that he presented. Study provided assurance about the recovery. And then these findings were disseminated to our donors, Global Fund, USAID, and the NMEP program itself. A formal inauguration was taking place of a tax team that was set up to develop a proof of concept. Then the development of the protocol and finalization. And then now we're at the Cross River ITN campaign 2023. So they have started and the distribution is scheduled for June. So that's when the nets will be collected during distribution at selected distribution hubs. An entry meeting was done with state engagement, with the state level personnel and all the relevant stakeholders. And then right now, activities are going across the different thematic campaign areas. So that's the SBC implementation, M&E, and logistics aspect. So we hope to conclude the campaign by the end of June, and then the results of the finding will be available around August, September. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And just to finalize that, once the data comes out, and I will say that BSF has funded this proof of concept, working with all the partners, as has PMI graciously supplied levels of effort from their implementing partners. So big thank you to PMI on that one, and Breakthrough Action Nigeria and GHSC PSM. Should that be successful? I mean, I think as with any proof of concept, you have to get lessons learned. And from those lessons, you can go on to a bigger pilot, which is the current plan. So I have a few minutes left until the end of this session. Does anyone have any questions relating to anything that was presented in this lunch session? I'd like to open it up. Chris.
Hi, Chris Warren from PMI. Just Jessica, in your experience in this work on this stream that's specific to vector control, ITN specifically, are we doing what we can at the country level with learning from the agricultural sector? I mean, plastic packaging, for pesticides, for fertilizers is not a new commodity. And I'm just wondering if we're leveraging the experience at a country level.
Any other questions? Here you go. Come on.
Yes, thank you very much. It's really interesting. Reflecting on end of life of nets and knowing very well that these nets are among the people and in families. And one of the findings that came out, I think, from the Nigeria study was that 70% of households were able to return their nets if they could get a new one. And of all the interventions that we think of waste management, I think this is the most, practical in the sense that it may work. And how would it work? If we retrieve, for example, these nets, they will become very bulky, at the national level once you've consolidated them. So what I think is that in that process, as we develop this project, we need to look at the proper supply chain for the unusable nets. That once you have collected these unusable nets, we need to look at the mechanism for recycling. And at this point, I think we need to have the manufacturers actually on board to see to it that, yes, in 2020, we distributed 28 million nets from Uganda. We're able to collect, say, 10 million unusable nets, and this should end up in the factory. And how do you do this? You need to invest and have resources definitely at the country level to manage the logistics and the supply chain for collecting this net. And I think that would be, for me, I think that would be really something that might work for the communities, but otherwise they'll continue to reuse these nets to protect plants and protect their animals, because really that's what they would be doing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Maha?
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation and skipping your lunch while we all are enjoying. Just adding to her, there is a rule of thumb, production is equal to waste management. So when we have huge amount of production of partners and distribution but waste management plans, starting from recollection to transportation and incineration is not, at times it's not budgeted, at times it's not under in consideration. So we have to put it in place at the time of production of planning level.
I saw another hand. Yeah.
Hello? So, looking forward, beyond election, beyond installation, we already started thinking about how much we can start concentrating actually cycling all of this plastic, and we already have thought education.
Yes, hi, David Gittleman, AMP Car Group. Just wanted to go back to the biodegradable packaging. Wanted maybe a little bit more information about what the price differential is, how accessible it is to this, and something could be even manufactured in country if they receive naked nets, and they could be repackaged in biodegradable packaging. Thanks.
Sir?
Thanks, Des. Yeah, just to maybe piggyback on what Chris has said, but waste management is not a malaria issue, right? It's a country issue. We've seen the number of waste just increase drastically since COVID, but we've also seen the funding being, increasing, especially with the Global Fund. So maybe are we looking to non-malaria partners, RSSH, to address this issue? Thank you.
See one in the back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Grace Adair from GHS CPSM. I do have a couple of questions. One is, a lot of the focus here has been on the country level disposal. Has there been any additional discussions about sort of the upstream supply chain waste management issues? Secondly, we've really focused on the plastic packaging, but I haven't had a lot of discussions around the insecticide, the pesticides, and the impact of concentration of those pesticides in our disposal plans, and how that ties in with whatever international regulation standards we're using. I work for a USAID project, so we have to adhere to USAID standards, but we know they're European standards. We know they're standards that govern international freight, which has affected our ability to transport bulk packaged nets. What standards are we using to dictate the waste management plans we are following? Thank you.
Very much. Is that all the questions? So I'll just take a couple of quick ones as we're ending, and then I'll hand it over. Since you just asked those questions, I think for upstream, that's not me to respond to, so I'd ask others working on the supply side, suppliers, anyone else to answer that, but I agree with you. I think there isn't a level of effort happening though. I think the impact of insecticides in the final product, when Mozambique did this during their last campaign, they did a pilot in Tet City. And ultimately, they collected the packaging and gave it to a local private sector recycler. And the only, the main point of the agreement was they could have the packaging for free, but they could not make items that would end up being used for food. So I think also depending on the way that the recyclers treat the plastic, I think and at the time of the end of life, the insecticide, it's pretty minimal in my opinion. I'd ask others to raise their hand. So for Chris's question, I don't think we're leveraging the ag sector enough, frankly. I think they have so much experience with this. But I think that that's something that potentially we should look up to CropLife to try and engage them on that a little bit more. For Maha, I couldn't agree more. It's part of the whole package. You really have to look from the beginning to the end. This is so new, but as we get to, I mean, we're distributing, making 260 million nets a year. We actually need to come up with some sort of definition of what should be included in macro and micro that includes waste management and budgeting. I want to, for recycling, the proof of concept in Nigeria is about creating a circular economy. It's not about collecting the nets, putting them on a ship, spending a lot of carbon and cost on sending them to, you know, wherever there's a large recycler. And it's about keeping it local, creating jobs, and ultimately having the final product there. So that is that. David, I'm not going to be able to respond to the biodegradable packaging. I think it gets really tricky actually because of the temperatures, the humidity and the like. It's meant to biodegrade. So the question is, when does that biodegradability actually kick in and there is a higher cost? I'm going to hand it over to Godwin and Fatty. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Just to amplify a few things that Jess had made mention of. In Nigeria, it's a collaboration between the ITN campaigns and the Recyclers Association of Nigeria. So when Chris asked whether we are learning from the agri sector, the volume of waste we're talking about is quite humongous, and we found a private sector partner in Recyclers Association of Nigeria who have existing structures on ground for actually picking plastic waste. And in the city of Calabar, we have also identified potential small-scale shredders, recyclers, who already have facilities that can begin an initial process of, refining the waste and making it suitable for further refining. And then it's like an integrated campaign between the campaigns and the end-of-life project. For example, whilst they are collecting the end-of-life nets, they're also collecting plastic waste from the campaign and moving them out of the environment completely. So it's like, an integration. I think that's all. The idea is not to simply incinerate the waste. The idea is actually to recycle the waste. And the private sector concern on grants actually has some experience in this regard. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question from Zainab from IFRC. She says, thank you to me, Godwin and Fatima. Who will bear the cost of moving the ITNs to the recycling center, the recycling company, or the implementer? So currently, as Godwin just said, we're trying to decide what the best process is, and that really does depend on the terrain, the location, the availability of the equipment to decide how it'll be transported, whether it be shredded and moved, whether it will be put in containers and moved. But it's really going to be country specific and based on what's available by the recyclers. So again, at this point of this project, however, the proof of concept is basically just that. It's a proof of concept to determine what's needed, what are the lessons learned, and how we can actually go to scale at the lowest cost possible, taking in lessons to be able to then move it up a little different. And every country is going to be different, and possibly it's easier in urban and peri-urban than it is in very remote areas. So this is just something that needs to be happening, and those discussions need to be happening at country level. Any other questions? I think we might be good. All right. Oh, I have one more. Yes, please.
Thank you. I know that all this discussion is about the disposal of ITN during mass campaign, but what do we do with the disposal out of the campaign context? Because here we are just considering the age of the ITN. But if the condition of the ITN cannot allow to use it again, and the household has to dispose this ITN. So what they have to do? Do we have guidelines, regulations for that?
So there are no guidelines. Thank you for your question. There are no guidelines, but I think the point being is that you could potentially, the point of this is to create a recycling kind of mindset at community level. So you could have small bins that could then be collected by recyclers. I mean, you're engaging the private sector recycling companies. So this is just a part of their business. And one thing I think it's really important to remind is that this also, PMI, the Global Fund, and other donors are getting more and more concerned about waste management across all the areas. So I think from a carbon perspective, from a country environmental perspective, some of these things actually are a cost benefit, whether you're implementing or not. Jimmy?
Yes, thank you. Mine is not a question. The IRS programs, which are also run in malaria programs, have very robust environmental compliance systems, including such waste management, their retrieval, and their recycling. We actually give them to private sector for use in generating other products which do not get in touch with food. So we could also look at that and see possibilities of integration. The same programs are doing that, only that this particular one had not been highlighted before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marcy has a question. Maybe a statement.
Yeah, no. It's actually just a quick comment that in addition to the Global Fund and PMI, WHO GMP has been in touch about this issue to ask what AMP is doing about it. So I think as a recommendation to the IEWG, it would be good to set up a more active working group on this topic, that more programs could join, because this isn't going to be a one size fits all. What you do in Nigeria is not going to work everywhere else, and we should not think it's going to. It's a proof of concept for Nigeria. So I think that when we think about moving this issue forward, we have a lot of bright minds coming from the country level, and I think it would be good to expand out the group and allow, like as Jimmy said, like there's experiences with IRS. We've seen it in Sierra Leone. We've seen some of the work in Liberia. So there's a lot happening in this space, but it's not coordinated. And I think there is a way forward, and bringing on the donors, partners, and implementers would be probably a helpful next step over.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking your lunch to have this conversation on waste management. I think it's timely. probably overdue, I would imagine. And if you have any other comments or any other questions or recommendations, the three of us are here, as is Marcy, and Joe will be coming tomorrow. Thank you so much.
We have some 4 minutes to the next session. So I would like to invite all the presenters up. Thank you. In the meantime, we can stretch as we reorient to another outlook. One more presenter, please, or is coming through online. Perfect. We have advantage of a few minutes, and we thank the End of Life Nets team for reserving for us a few minutes. So this is a continuation of what we started earlier. In the past 5 years, the malaria community has been faced with some realities. One is that from blind coverage, we have no choice but to think about optimization. This fact has been clear in the past 5 years. The next thing is that we have to go away from one size fits all to contextualizing things properly according to the obtaining conditions and the evidence. The other is a realization that we have to move away from silos, ITN, IRS, case management, chemo prevention. Also, the other is more tools came on board, and therefore we needed to think intervention packages. But how do we exactly place them? Earlier, we looked at the role of evidence in subnational tailoring and the various contextual factors. But how does this get operationalized in real life in the field is what we are going to look at. And so let me invite Dr. Hannah to come and start. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you in Nairobi. I'm Dr. Hannah Conker. I'm the technical director at Tropical Health. Do I need to use the clicker? Okay. So my presentation is called How Many Nets Are Needed to Maintain Universal Coverage? Because we can reach it, we keep reaching it, and then we keep not maintaining it because of wear and tear on nets and net durability. So we all know that nets are not lasting as long as we would like them to, and it would be nice if we understood really super clearly exactly how long they are lasting in every little specific place where we want to put them. However, the more complex our subnational tailoring gets, the more complex our distribution strategies get, the more uncertainty sort of arises within some of our estimates around net durability. So just to kind of point out, we've seen this graph a lot. It's in the World Malaria Report showing, from Amelia's data, and the Malaria Atlas Project data that nets are lasting less than 3 years across most countries. But I want to highlight that some of the durability studies that PMI has funded, that other countries have done, don't always match up with some of these estimates. So just up front, there are some questions about, what is the, what's the real amount of time that a net lasts and what affects that longevity? And how do we sort of deal with that in terms of quantifying for our mass campaigns and quantifying for other types of distribution? So with the data that Amelia produced for those estimated retention times, we realized that we could sort of project outward what will net access look like under different distribution scenarios, given these specific retention times that are specific to each country. So maybe it was time now, 10 years on, to kind of revisit, is population divided by 1.8 the right quantifier to use for mass campaigns in all settings, given what we know about how long nets are lasting? And obviously, you guys remember, those of you who were there, that the 1.8 quantifier arose because we were trying to accommodate households that don't have an even number of people when we're trying to give 1 net for every 2 people. So we have to round up in households that have 3 people or 5 people or 7. So the key questions that we wanted to ask were, we do the 3-year campaign cycle, or we try to. We don't always meet it because of various delays. But if we're doing 3-year campaigns, but our nets are basically lasting 2 years on average, what does that mean for ITN access and for protection from malaria? Is there a reason then to switch to 2-year campaigns, or would another distribution modality be more efficient? And obviously efficiency is the name of the game in the resource constrained environment. Then we can also ask, should we do something different than population divided by 1.8 in countries where nets are lasting a longer or shorter period of time? Would that be more efficient than adjusting the frequency of the campaign schedule? And then finally, because you guys know that I love continuous distribution, we want to ask, what is the right quantification process for continuous distribution? Can we make it easy and simple? So we haven't had any simple way to do quantification for continuous distribution, and I have spoken with basically all of you at some point over the last 10 years about NetCalc and different types of modeling to determine exactly how many nets should go in to maintain coverage at a certain level. Quantifying the number of nets for ANC channels and immunization channels is relatively easy. Those population sizes are fairly standard in terms of proportion of the population across different places. But because we haven't had an easy quantification approach for CD, we as AMP really feel that that's been a big barrier to uptake and scale up of continuous distribution. Because it's just like, wow, I need to do a NetCalc, I need to wide, I don't understand, I'm just gonna do a mass campaign, which is totally fair. So what can we recommend as a good quantifier for each country, taking into account the times that the nets are lasting on average to achieve our ITN access targets, either with campaigns or combinations? I am probably going too fast for the translators. Sorry, let me slow down. All right. I only have 2 slides on the methods, so bear with me. So we ran 131 different scenarios at different sort of amounts of nets going in through 5 different scenarios. So scenario 1 is our status quo. Most countries are implementing 3-year mass campaigns, as well as implementing ANC distribution and distribution to infants. Okay, so that's status quo, most countries. Scenario 2 is our full-scale continuous scenario, which is like a Tanzania school distribution option where mass campaigns don't happen unless there's a need to catch back up coverage if the school channel isn't working fully. And that might be school distribution, or it could be community-based distribution. The scenario 3 is the Ghana style, so mass campaigns every 3 years with continuous distribution at a slightly smaller scale in between campaigns to kind of offset some of those losses of nets between campaigns. And then scenarios 4 and 5 are either 3-year mass campaigns where we adjust the quantifier to see what might work best for different countries, or scenario 5 is 2-year mass campaigns where we also adjust that, that quantifier. Okay. So basically what we do in the computer, in the code, is we create a fake population of about 10 million people, because it doesn't really matter the population in this particular instance. We deliver nets according to the population, according to these different quantification strategies and the different distribution strategies. And then all those nets each year kind of decay downward because nets wear out, and we have functions that describe that decay process, which are specific to the retention times that countries have according to that WHO data. We can then calculate ITN access based on the population from a nets per capita conversion into ITN access, which is here. And if anybody really wants to talk through that with me, I would be thrilled. So we have 131 of these charts to go through. We don't, I won't do that to you, don't worry. But just to kind of give a quick picture of a few of the scenarios, we've got our typical rise and fall of ITN access as a result of the campaign cycle, 3-year campaign cycle in scenario 1 on the left. We've got a more steady rate of ITN access, which is maintained at different levels depending on how long nets are lasting in the full-scale continuous distribution scenario. So that would be the goal. That's why we talk about continuous distribution, is because we do believe that it would maintain steady coverage as opposed to dropping coverage down every so often. And then we've got our 3-year campaign cycle at different, this is our Ghana scenario on the left, and then a 2-year campaign cycle on the right. So if anybody wants to see those later in more detail, you are most welcome. Okay, so findings, we're not distributing enough nets right now to maintain ITN access at 80%. That's not a surprise, I think, to any of us. The question is, what can we do about it? Again, given the resource constraints that we're operating under. Of course, ANC and EPI distribution are important for the vulnerable groups. They don't make a big difference to your overall ITN access levels in the context of all these other nets that are going out there. So obviously important to keep those channels up, make sure that they are working, make sure that they are stocked. But adjusting the performance of those channels doesn't necessarily make a big overall difference to your overall coverage. Retention times for the ITNs are obviously the key driver of these differences that we're going to see country by country in ITN access in these different scenarios. And average household size also plays an important role, which I won't go into, but it has to do with the relationship between the nets that we distribute and then the ITN access that we can get out of those nets. So in terms of the recommended quantification approaches for continuous distribution, I've got, and this is all from a paper that should be out already, but is not quite out yet. So as soon as it does come out, you'll definitely get an email. We have 6 kind of illustrative countries, each with a shorter or longer ITN retention time. So trying to go kind of 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, even 3.5 years in Cameroon, to sort of show you the variation that we have in what we recommend for different distribution scenarios. So we'll take scenario 2 here as a full continuous distribution strategy. If we want to target 80% ITN access, and we are in, let's say, Togo, then we need to annually order enough nets, order the number of nets that's equal to population times 19%, and put that through whatever continuous distribution channel might be implemented there. Because Togo's nets are lasting 2.4 years on average, that would enable the country to maintain ITN access at 80%. If this number of nets is ordered each year and then distributed. For places where nets last longer, like Cameroon or Congo Brazzaville, you can get away with ordering fewer nets because the nets that you have will last longer. And if your retention times or net longevity is shorter, you need to buy a lot more nets to obtain the same coverage. So I think the concept is not that tricky, but it is nice, I hope, to have some guidance on the sort of levels and the numbers that can be used to quantify for countries to work with. Same thing with scenario 3. If we want to, do mass campaigns and then do continuous distribution between, Togo would need to order population times 8% worth of nets in those years between the campaigns and then distribute them to maintain coverage at that target level. Okay. This table is basically the same. We're just adding in some of the results from the campaign model. So these are the best quantifiers that would allow you to maintain 80% ITN access, but you would need to divide your population by, in Cameroon, 1.7, in Congo Brazza, 1.5, and in Togo, 1.2. And then in Tanzania, you kind of need to give a net to every person every 3 years in order to have enough nets at the beginning that you still maintain 80% coverage at the end of the 3 years. So it's oversupplying at the beginning so that you have households with enough nets at the end of the campaign period. Not necessarily what we want to do, right? Because that's a lot of nets, but it's useful to see the comparisons, and we'll have more on that in a bit right here. So basically, if we're thinking about what we're doing right now, 3-year campaigns with pregnant women and infants also getting nets, and this sort of represents the number of nets that we're currently putting out through those channels, and then the colored bars represent shorter and longer ITN lifespans. Full-scale CD, I'm sorry, that is so small. Full-scale CD actually requires fewer nets overall than what we're doing now, as long as you are in one of these 3 longer categories where your nets are lasting 2 years or more. That will maintain, according to the model, ITN access at 80%. Mass campaigns that are tailored to hit that 80% target will hit the 80% target, but they are going to require a lot more nets than what we're currently doing. They also require a lot more nets than these continuous distribution options. So I would love for countries to think about this in terms of, what are we trying to do efficiently? How do we make some trade-offs in terms of coverage and optimization? This is a viable option for moving forward in the resource constrained environment. Okay. So, yes. I got a few more slides and then we'll have a Q&A period towards the end. So I appreciate this, they're a little bit data heavy. So just to sort of sum up some of the takeaway messages. We know that 3-year campaigns are not maintaining 80% access, and they provide incomplete protection in between campaigns for countries with median ITN lifespans that are less than 3 years, which is basically everybody, right? Except Cameroon, or who knows why, but let's do what Cameroon is doing. If we want to maintain high ITN access with 3-year campaigns, we need a lot more nets in the campaign itself, and oversupply essentially, so that households still have enough to use once those first ones wear out. Full-scale continuous distribution of nets could maintain ITN coverage access at 80% or higher more steadily with fewer nets compared to those 3-year campaigns, if the nets are lasting at least 2 years. And even for many of these countries, we have nets that are estimated to last less than 2 years. So we need to think about that. The tailored 2-year campaign option is super inefficient. Nobody should do that. And even sort of as we're looking at all of this, many countries still need more ITNs than we're currently procuring if they want to reach 80% access. So how accurate are all these parameters? It all hinges on the estimated retention times. And like I said before, we have variability in the estimated retention times from the WHO work and from some of the durability monitoring studies. So for example, Liberia, we call you out in the, modeling work with a retention time of 1 year, but your PMI durability monitoring is showing, nets with a median lifespan of 4 years. That's a big difference. And what do we do with that? Durability also varies within a country. We see clearly in Nigeria, nets lasting much longer in the north and less long in the central and then the southern areas. And we also need to kind of consider these potential differences as we're thinking about planning. So one of the things I'm working with is a matrix, for example. So if the nets in Liberia last 1 year, that's one thing. If they last 2.5 years, that requires a different quantification approach. And then with that data, program could make an assumption about how long do we really think our nets are lasting. Maybe it's somewhere between 1 and 4, and then decide how we want to move forward with the quantification. So wouldn't it be great if we could make the nets last longer? Yes, obviously. And more durable nets would help. There's a lot of work going on to try and improve what we know about what makes nets more durable or less durable. We have resistance to damage scores that were kind of redone for nets in 2020 that should be coming out shortly. Those textile tests help us kind of determine whether nets are going to stand up to the stresses that they find themselves in all of these households. Improved net care behaviors would also really help. And, nets are fragile items. They're literally mesh. They're going to snag on things. And we subject them to nightly use, in the best case, on surfaces that are rough and there's chickens and kids and goats, and right, this is not an optimal environment for using this kind of voile, tissue, which is amazing at protecting people, but only if it's not full of holes. So we need to work both on the physical kind of construction durability of the net, as well as on care and prevention behaviors to improve net longevity. But there's still going to be nets getting holes. So, we can try and move the needle, but we need to just keep in mind that we're not going to get, metal window screen type of nets that are super resistant. Okay, and then just a reminder about ITN use, right? Because we can talk about 80% targets for ITN access, but because we have this persistent gap in use, even though it's small, if we target 80% ITN access, we're only going to reach 70% ITN use. So if we want to get to 80% use or higher, access needs to be higher as well. And at some point, we're going to have to come to grips with what are our targets, and we're not reaching them. And do we want to adjust the target officially or adjust our procurement strategy, our distribution strategy to hit the targets that we actually want to hit? Okay, I think I've gone through most of these limitations already. It's uncertainty. Okay, so given what we know about the variability of ITN durability across settings, I think it is important from a subnational tailoring perspective and from a regional tailoring perspective to try and take into account how long nets are lasting. And we can use these quantification approaches to manage that. Continuous distribution strategies are projected to provide better ITN access with fewer ITNs, as long as countries have nets that are lasting at least 2 years. If we want to reach target levels of 80% ITN use, we need to aim for 90% ITN access, which is higher than we generally hit ever. And we need to find a way to do this. And obviously, with the funding constraints that we're under, this is no small task, but I think it's still worth discussing and not ignoring as a sort of elephant in the room. All right, so I think I just have a few slides here. This guidance did make it into the CRSPC malaria note ahead of the Global Fund preparation meetings. And there's links, and we'll send these out to the meeting participants of the full table with results for each and every country that was in the analysis. We don't have, obviously, everybody worldwide, but we do have full sets of results. And if anybody's interested in talking further with me about this, I'm very happy to do that. Thank you.
Very interesting, isn't it? Thank you. Now let's have Peter, let's hold on our questions because the presentation coming next, Tanzania has attempted one of these options. So let's see how it works out.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter from National Malaria Control Program, Tanzania. I'm just here on behalf of NSP to take you through for the distribution channel in Tanzania, which we already impact, and actually just to support the concept of HANA that few nets can attain higher access compared to having the mass campaign. So by starting with, these are my presentation outline. I will go through the background of the malaria in Tanzania, but also the distribution channel so far. We are having 5 of them. And then I'll just show the quantification approach as also Hannah tried to explain. These are just the background of information for malaria in Tanzania. We have the ITNs as one of the core vector intervention in terms of distribution of ITN together with IRS, but also we be supplemented by larva source management using BTI and the BS as one of the larvae, but also we have the other different mechanisms as I'm going to explain them. Just noting briefly that this is targeted replacement campaign. It means that we now not doing the massive way, we do a targeted one, not the all one size fit all, no, but in a strata ways. But also we have the SchoolNet and the RSH and the special group distribution channel. This is a kind of a new to few groups which are really marginalized. But also there is a shrinkage in terms of malaria prevalence in Tanzania. But this due to vector control intervention together with the ACT, as they also contributed to the really shrinkage of the malaria burden in the country. Here, just to appreciate that we have the region from the year 2018 to 2023. We have this malaria burden, strata. We have very low, moderate, and high. So if you look from the year 2018 to 2023, there is a little decrease in terms of malaria burden. For example, if you go to the council level, the implementation start of our stratification, you can find that there is a decrease in number of region, in number of council with high malaria burden from 73 to 57. Relative the same to the council of very low malaria burden has increased from 28 to 38. So from here you can say that Lille vector control intervention, which we are deploying together with the case management approach, it helped to prevent or to reduce the burden of malaria in the country. So this is just a map, the same thing, you can approach it. This is the level of region, but straight to the same for the council level. You can see now in terms of council, the very low region were at 28. Now they have increased, as you can see, the green color. The green color now indicates that very low malaria burden. Down the part of the central part of the country, we sometimes refer them as the central corridor. However, in southern part of Tanzania, bordered by a friend from Mozambique, and the other from here in Uganda and the Congo, seem to still have a higher burden, though we are really pushing toward our goal of eliminating malaria by 2030. So this is just a delivery mechanism of ITNs with the malaria stratum. As you can see now in very low, we only do the health facility or the RSH together with the special groups. But for the more rural, moderate, and high, we do deploy RSH special group targeted replacement campaign together with the school net distribution. However, we have also the urban. Urban is a kind of operational strata. You can find some of the, it can be urban, but with either of these 4 epidemiological strata, either very low, low, or moderate. So starting with the health facility distribution, actually this is very common. Like other countries in Africa, they were doing the EPI distribution to pregnant women together with the infants during their measles rubella vaccination at 9 months. And those are the registers. These are the 2 used for data corrections. And this is just to appreciate the performance of the continuous distribution, especially the RSH1. You can see that we started in year 2016. However, up to now, we have really doing better. However, there are some regions that are not attaining the 100%, but actually there are so many factors which might also contribute to this. And most of them we have started taking actions on how to address so that you can have a whole region like here having 100% this in Mtwara. So this is also very important in emphasizing in terms of attaining our access in using the QNets as one of the components of continuous distribution. These are some of the action actually we are taking through. We have the quarterly mentorship operation research. We are doing so. 2021, we did some operation research and found some really reason to why we are not attaining. And now we are addressing them through different approach, including mentorship. We have the second delivery mechanism of net to the community as a continuous with the school net distribution. It's also, this is most of countries common. However, in Tanzania, we started in 2013, and now it's done country-wise. And these are just criteria that we distribute from standard 1 to standard 7. And the PUP here are used as a conduit or means to deliver the net to the community, just to take the net and then deliver to the community. That's why, but also provide education special to the community, especially education in terms of care and repair, as we see from the previous presentation, that it's very crucial for that to make sure that we are really having an effect in terms of vector control intervention. This is just a map showing the division in terms of a funder. This blue color is a PMI funder in terms of SchoolNet program. There are 14 regions. And this pink, I think this is, I might be correct, though I might be color blind, but this is pink. This is a global fund regions where they also support a SchoolNet distribution. And the last year we managed to push over 4.7 million through SchoolNet system, but also we have our system for reporting the data. Is called the school information system being used country-wise. The third delivery mechanism in Tanzania, we do have the targeted replacement campaign. We nowadays not call massive campaign. That's why I had some question with my friend who are really back in the countrywide mass campaign. We know how really cumbersome the campaign is. So for Tanzania, we are doing the targeted one, but using the electronic things as one of the requirements need to deliver the net using digital thing, but we do it quickly, but also the data also are really become really time data, but also is relative cost because it involves a few people in terms of resources, even time of implementation, because we know that one of inefficiency in terms of vector control tools is delivery mechanism. Suppose you deliver net for a quiet 6 months or 8 months. How can you know that you really get the impact? Suppose the time you are delaying might be the peak season. So by doing the targeted replacement campaign using the digital things in Tanzania, we've seen now the impact in terms of you do quick, and then even the data quality also have the advantage in terms of, but also data supervision. We can do a targeted one, but also it can also contribute to the reduction in terms of minimizing the effect of person-to-person contacts. And this is just a visualization of our dashboard. It saves the web part and the mobile part. These are some of the to approach the press already done the targeted replacement campaign so far. We started 2021. We did in Katavi, bordered by Congo. Last year we did in Linde Mtwara. And this year around we are going to do Kagera and Tabora, because this region or this subunity have highest malaria burden or prevalence according to the malaria indicator survey for the last year, 2022. So we are going to do it, but also the ITN access in these regions is also below 40. It means that we cannot raise the access to 80% using the only continuous distribution by using or basing the previous quantification and not this quantifier. So this is also another advantage of doing the targeted one, but also maintaining by using the new quantification approach, as Hannah was trying to explain in the previous presentation. The first delivery mechanism we have now introduced in Tanzania is the special groups, we so-called alternative or special ITN distribution. We've gone so far and asked ourselves, we've been doing this continuous in some of this mass campaign after 3 years, and some areas maybe could not even manage to do in 3 years due to some logistic and whatever interruptions like campaign. So we found that we better now think another more group. We've moved ahead to think about these groups who seem to be really vulnerable, like elderly from 60 years and above. And I can say from here that when we introduce this concept, it has been gained by political commitment, because whatever the intervention we are doing, we always rely on pregnant women and under 5 children. So when we introduce these groups, I mean, especially the elderly, so many, even politicians supported us. They say, this is super. So you need now to go really how better document it. And actually some of them, they are told us that because when you are younger, you're in program, you never even remember that you are going to be 60 and above years, you see. So for us, it become like is a kind of a champion moving forward to see more groups. For this time around now, we have done for 60 and a year above, under 5 severe children. But people, our fellow living with HIV also, we see like it's very important to include them in the program. We issue them net every after 2 years. And why 2 years? Because we see that our lifespan of mosquito nets is 2.15 years. So it means that if you issue to them like 3 years, you are going to live almost a year unprotected. There's a major concept. Why do we deliver them to the to only 2 years instead of 3 or 4 years? But also we are looking forward to go further to other groups like pastoralists who are really nomadic in other place. So this is just a way how we do document, just to pinpoint. The elder, we issue them every after 2 years. We have our HMS tools called number 5, and then we enter them in our DHRC systems, and we be done in all our health facilities together with the under 5, but we really deal with the malaria, I mean, with the severe malaria or anemic condition due to severe malaria. When being discharged out from the hospital, we really issue a free mosquito net for, and then we the same thing into the data into the DHIS2 or HMS system. So for the last part of our new special groups, people living with HIV, we also improved our documentation in terms of CTC card, where we have already, we use the same system database, which used by our fellow National AIDS Control Program. So we integrated. So this is the kind of integration with National Malaria Control Program together with National AIDS Control Program to deliver our service at our health facility at once. So that is like a one-point stop for a client to receive a net and then receive other facility. I think this needs a clap from Tanzania's perspective. Can we have a clap for Tanzania for this innovative? Thank you. So yeah, these are just documentation so far. Maybe on the discussion you can ask more, but for the last 5 is commercial. This is kind of delivery mechanism where we always engage the stakeholder and always we are aiming to fill the customer preference, because particularly in urban setting, people, they prefer more kind of mosquito net, which have maybe different color. For Tanzania, we do deliver nets, blue, light blue nets. Some of them the 4 angles. But if you go to urban setting, people like maybe white color nets. Some of them, they like pink, especially you go for ladies that like pink, like their bed sheet. Some of them they like green. So really for the mass campaign or for the public perspective, it was really to cover them up. Now we are really engaging, creating another environment with their private sector so that we also engage more. But we really trying to reverse the issue of untreated net, because in commercial sector, they are really what are selling is untreated, majority of the nets. However, now our plan is to reverse now to increase at least the treated net at least to 2 up to 3 million a year, so that people will be also any or receiving net from the commercial which is really treated, so we can also go together in terms of malaria prevention instead of using the untreated one, which is they really not offer much protection compared to the treated one. So this is just a summary of quantification approach which we use in Tanzania, as Hannah also explained. This also here we also referred that we really did to Bella because it really give us some findings in terms of attaining the access in the country. So here again, just to see the number or appreciate the number which we this year around, we are going to distribute almost 14.9 nets with all these different channels. So we really, although we also have the targeted replacement campaign, but the alternative, the school net. So what we mean here is the delivery mechanism according to malaria strata can also offer or can deliver more net to the community and able to attain the universal access. And lastly, I would like to conclude. This is our summary, just to continue with the continued distribution for all groups, but also using the PBO, but also the new generation nets, and continue monitoring the access. Because as we said, we do targeted replacement campaign when the access is below 40. So we need to monitor. So that once it's below 40, the particular subunits is where now we can do a TRC or targeted replacement campaign, as we did in Katavi, Lindi, and today, I mean, this year around, we are going to do Kagera and Tabora. By saying so, thank you so much. Asanteni sana.
Thank you. I think we are still well in time. We have about 20 minutes for question and answer. For those online, please, you can type in the Q&A and I will be able to read it. So we are quickly going to take on the questions. Could I be helped moving the microphone in no particular order? We have time, so everyone could have an opportunity.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have a question to Hannah. Regarding the calculation for continuous distribution, you said 8% of the total population. My question is regarding, does it also link to the methodology for continuous distribution? As in Pakistan, we mostly use pregnant women and we give bed nets on first antenatal. So we cover the population, which is the pregnant or the reproductive age. So if we are covering the 8% of the total population, then we won't be able to find out this much number of pregnant women. So then 8% is to cover different methodologies? Because with pregnant women, it's not possible. So that's my query. Thank you.
There's already a microphone behind. Mehta,
Okay.
hold on.
Yes, thank you, David Gilman, and congratulations to both the presentations. Very well done. This is a question for Tanzania. I was intrigued by the alternative and special groups risk groups that you had talked about. Interested how you define those, how you selected those particular ones, because I know in some countries the children out of school are sometimes considered adolescents a risk group, but it is consistent with reaching the unreached. I'm curious about whether children out of schools would be considered eventually in this group to be reached as a vulnerable group. What quantities of nets are we talking about? Are we talking about having to divert nets from other supplies in order to handle this group? And is there partner donor support to date for these special groups? Thank you.
Okay. I have very many questions, but I will summarize one. The first one is the school net distribution. How are you tracking the distribution of nets in every class when we know that these nets are supposed to be with children or pupils every 3 years? Is it sustainable? Is it the way to utilize resources efficiently? Then two, is there no risk to increase the fertility rate? Because people can be motivated as part of the mechanism. Then number three, I think we need to put a very clear distinction between mass campaign and universal coverage. Possibly you are doing mass campaign, but not universal coverage, because in your target distribution, you have massive audience that you cover. Then I need more guidance. Are you doing a catch up or a keep up? Because in a catch up, you are accelerating your plan to the lost gains. But in a keep up, you have already achieved your gains and you want to make sure you don't go beyond the coverage. Maybe you can discuss other things, but in summary, WHO guides us for any IVM intervention. We need to have over 80% coverage to maximize the benefits. Are you above 85% 80 coverage for intervention to maximize the benefits, or you are just using the best way to deliver your service with minimal energy or efforts? Thank you.
Jessica?
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for those great presentations. I also have two questions, Tanzania. No one's just targeting you though. As for your special populations, I'm curious, I think it's great that you're integrating with the AIDS Commission, but I'm curious for those people living with HIV, where are you funding those nets from? From their budget or from your budget, or are you sharing those? And then also, as it relates to private sector ITN sales, how will you promote from a price point, I guess it would be price, to really get people to use and buy the treated nets? Are you subsidizing or are you using another approach? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my name is Harki from Vestergaard. Question to Tanzania. Some years ago, you were also conducting large campaigns, distribution campaigns. You've now established 5 different channels, including your targeted coverage. How has that impacted your resources, funding, in terms of balancing out? Has it shown any difference? Is it cheaper to do it that way? Or what is your experience?
Okay, looks like we are done with the questions. The following has come through online from Anita Kamara. Thank you for the presentation. Grateful if you could throw light on the disposal mechanism for ITN distribution on the school-based one specifically. That how do you handle it in the schools? Then we have from Drake, as malaria goes down, how do you adjust both nets given? Especially, can you know how to use higher coverage to drive malaria down further? This was not specified, so it can go to any of you. Over to you. Oh, you have a microphone? Okay.
So I think I have one question, so maybe I'll take that one first, and then I'll let you handle the onslaught of other questions. Okay, great. Thank you for the question. If I understood it correctly, and there's like maybe some weirdness between my ears and the speakers, but does the population times whatever percent, does it matter for which channels are used, right? Okay, so the idea is that whatever combination of channels you want to use, the total continuous distribution need is captured in that number. So not routine and not for pregnant women and for infants, that's separate. But for your school, your elderly, your CTC, your counseling, testing, and care, HIV groups, sorry. Whatever other groups you would like to focus on, that number is the number to then divide between those target groups. Then that depends on like the ratios of your population. So, you know, Peter could talk about, we have this number of school children, and that's relevant to the proportion of people coming to the counseling and testing centers versus the estimated elderly population. So yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, from some of the questions I may just try to answer. In Tanzania, for the school net distribution channel, we have system in place. As I mentioned, we have the school information system, which is the system under the Ministry of Education, whereby all pupils, after being enrolled each year on 31st of March each year, so we can able now to monitor and take the data from the SIS system and then issue the net, because even the quantification now, we can all know the number of pupils in a particular school, in a particular council. So even the tracking system after issuing is very easy, because the system can even go higher to the name of the pupils, the number of the pupil in a particular class. So the number of net to be delivered is automatically known from the system, which really have a lot of information in particular, which go down to the school level. The other question was, in Tanzania, are we doing mass campaign or universal catch-up? Because this, when I mentioned RSH or health facility distribution, school net, and these special groups, all of these are really continuous distributions. But we do catch up when we found that the access fall below 40%, in particular, especially in the higher malaria burden. So we really do both. When it happens, the access will go down. And we know for sure how better we do find the access of the ITNs being done by the survey, national survey. And recently we have the malaria indicator survey in Tanzania. It also shows some of the where the coverage, the access, where it's been done. So it also gives us a trigger. What should we do next before we do? But we always have some surveys, mobile phone survey we do with our partner TVCA. We can also monitor through the mobile phone survey and get some of the results. So the other question was in terms of funding of the alternative channel. This is a global fund motivated us to do. And actually, if you combine these two, these special groups in totality, the HIV, the under 5 together with all. So generally last time when we did a quantification, it's almost make a contribution of 5% of Tanzania population. You see, it's really a huge number in terms of covering or protect them against this key intervention or co-intervention in Tanzania. So it's really amazing. But in terms of commercial, how sector is being done, do we subsidize? So, so far, so good. Currently in Tanzania, the commercial one is happening using untreated in mosquito nets.
So, and actually this is a challenge. We say now we are creating an enabling environment because we know for sure the imported nets already made, they always come cheaper. And the most of them that are coming from, sorry to mention some of the country, like product, they are really not durable in search for people from the rural, really, we know malaria is a rural disease. So having those commercial with very undurable, whatever texture is really become leaving the community unprotected. That's why now we started the enabling environment, sitting with the Minister of Finance, Minister of Importation to see how better we can add up the tax and tariff for the importation. Rather, we create a good environment for manufacturer. The good thing for us in Tanzania, we have the factory, so that we can make like kind of regulatory, so that once you the imported net to be the purchased higher compared to the manufactured, and which are really treated in it. Automatically, we can also manage the market. The market is also really supplying and buying things. So we are really having some guidelines so far. We had a guideline for commercial, and they were really having some series of meeting with different stakeholders so that to really manage and enable the commercial sector also to really pull and deliver net, which are really treated to the community. So the other thing, disposal, I think Hannah tried to explain, but the really school net disposal is the same thing as we are discussing during the lunchtime period. So I want to go further to really discuss on this part. When malaria go down, how do we remove ITN? I think this was just a comment. Thank you.
Peter, one more line for you from Jen Miller. Thank you, Peter and Anna. Peter, how do you plan to get nets to those over 60? Where do you get them? What mechanism, what vehicle?
Yeah, okay. For we in Tanzania, we have actually the statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics. We know for exactly how many people are 60 years and above. 60 years is a continuous. People turn 60 every day, right? So for us in Tanzania, where do we capture? We capture at the health facility level, because we know that for sure once you'll be old, even in Swahili they say, in Tanzania, in Swahili they say spana mkononi. This word is very common. It means that once you get old, you always visit the health facility by any means. You can't have 3 months or 4 months without going to the health facility. So we easily capture them on the health facility. They come, we give another facility. I mean, we get there.
Are they getting a net every 3 months when they go to the facility?
I mean, I would just try to explain where do we capture. We capture them from the health facility. Once they come, seeking for the medical treatment, whatever, be treated, but also offer the free mosquito net. So once it's been issued, they've been decoded as I showed from the register and Mtuha Buku, so that he or she will not also be issued again until 2 years. That's the lifespan. Once he come again after 2 years, they go in the record and find, did you get the net? Yes, then yes. So I think I'm clear.
Okay, thank you. I'm quickly tending there. Today you've had I'm 50, so 10 years of big history next week. We still have around 6 minutes. Yes, Mercy and the gentleman behind you. We have just 6 minutes, so you make it snappy.
So thank you, Jean-Yves Mukamba, CRS, Global Malaria Program. My first question is for both of you. Do you see a continuity or complementarity between the two approaches? I mean, tailoring, using data at the country level and then at the subnational level. And the second question is for tailoring this distribution at subnational level. I don't know, do you do distribution on a routine basis or on a campaign mode for different group, or you proceed differently regarding a group to another? For example, for the elderly people over 60 years old, or for school, or for people living with HIV. Thanks.
So I'm giving you one, Hannah, and I'm more
Meanwhile,
just trying.
someone take a microphone behind there. Meantime.
I'm more just trying to make sure we're all in understanding the terms right. So during your presentation, we've talked about retention and we've talked about durability. Can you, for the room, define if those two things are the same and we use those words interchangeably? Because we've certainly been looking at retention since the first surveys in 2004 in Togo, and it had nothing to do with durability, right? It was, is your net still in your house? And that was a separate question. So I wanted you to maybe hit on that. And then Peter, thank you for the presentation. If I understood correctly, where you're doing the mass replacement campaign or the TRC, those are also areas where you have been doing school-based distribution. So I wanted to understand, you know, I saw your criteria meant that, you know, your coverage had dropped below 40%, which is from that very, very old guidance, I think. So what happened with the school-based to get that coverage down, and what adjustments are you making to the school-based distribution so that you can avoid, you know, sort of going back to the campaign style distribution? Thanks. Over.
Finally, the gentleman behind.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Anna, for your presentation. My name is Victor Adebayo from Catholic Relief Services. So during your presentation, you had mentioned that to maintain high level of ITN access, it's preferable to more nets is needed, even to the tune of oversupplying. So my question is, we have just talked about the cost implication of the net and the funding landscape. What's the implication of that? Because when nets are oversupplied, there's a possibility of a diversion and even wastage. And obviously, because of the cost implication of the net is quite high. So how do we balance this? And then for the Tanzanian presentation, you did mention that you target replacement campaigns to people living with HIV. How do you integrate with the national AIDS program in your country, especially with the possibility of confidentiality and, you know, issues of discrimination when it comes to HIV program? It would be good to hear from you how you manage that. Thank you.
One more behind there and finally in front, and we are closed. Oh, he had been a chair, he has to receive. Okay, three more. We have exactly 3 minutes, so to leave time for response, please just make them very snappy.
Thank you. Sorry, I wanted to quickly ask Anna Konka if NetCAC is still relevant in modeling continental distribution based on your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. The gentleman there could take this one. Okay, please go ahead. Go ahead.
OK. Moi, je vais intervenir en français. La stratégie de la Tanzanie nous intéresse quand même parce que c'est une spécificité dans les campagnes, parce que c'est vraiment ciblé et la cible, c'est les enfants, les élèves et puis les personnes, n'est-ce pas, atteintes de sida. Alors, est-ce qu'il ne se pose pas ici un problème d'équité au sein des ménages? Parce que ici en Afrique, il y a des ménages qui envoient tous les enfants à l'école. Là, il doit y avoir plus de moustiquaires. Et d'autres, peut-être, surtout en milieu rural, ce n'est pas tous les enfants qui fréquentent l'école. Alors, la question qui se pose, est-ce que vous avez, n'est-ce pas, fait une évaluation pour voir les quantités de MILDA reçues au niveau de certains ménages où on envoie trop d'enfants et dans les ménages où les gens n'envoient pas trop les enfants à l'école? Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca, working for PACE. It's in addition to the previous questions. Did you collate your data? Is it digitally collected, especially for the schools? Because it can easily be digitally collected so that you can be able to collate your data in CEPI, one household, if you know the head of household, so that we can be able to avoid a lot of nets within one household. And then it will also end up in a number of issues also regarding misuse. So I think it's a very good strategy, but since you mentioned that there is poor reporting, isn't it creating a lot of nets being put into one household. And also this also results into cost effectiveness of the 3 different strategies. You have a strategy for how cost effective it is to have those 3 strategies of LLI distribution. Thanks.
Okay, finally. There's a microphone there already.
Thank you. My question goes to Peter. It's related to the quantification and targeting when it comes to the commercial sector approach. So I was wondering, to stimulate private sector involvement, you might have some ways of quantifying the needs and the potential market you are targeting, so that they can see what is the potential market you're talking about. What factors are you using to quantify that potential market offer?
Okay. Please go ahead. Organizers, please allow us 5 more minutes. We're out of time already, but these are very important questions.
Okay, so I'll go first again. So I think for Marcy's question about definition of retention versus durability, if we look at Amelia's paper, retention is the physical presence of nets in the surveys that she looked at from each country, several sets of surveys. So it's whether the net is there or not. It doesn't take into account the condition of the net, whether it has holes or not, or whether it's still in use. So that's a caveat maybe in terms of that particular definition. For the durability data, that takes into account the physical condition of the net. So it's the proportion of nets that are surviving in serviceable condition, out of nets that were distributed, accounting for, well, ignoring essentially nets that were given away because those might be in use somewhere else and we don't know their final outcome. So there is a slight difference. I think we can still think about them in terms of median survival, median lifespan. They're not completely different indicators, but there are some nuances that are there. For the question about Sierra Leone, which I had trouble hearing, but I think it was, is there Sierra Leone data in the results? And if that was the question, the answer is yes, definitely. And we'll send out the link to the draft paper, which has the full set of results for each country. So almost all of sub-Saharan Africa is there. Outside Africa, not so much. And then I think our colleague from CRS had a question about oversupply in the context of limited funding and the high costs of nets. You know, obviously we're stuck between a rock and a hard place with the cost of nets, the number that we actually need, and how long they're lasting. So if we had a good solution for this, we wouldn't be here. We would be out delivering nets, but we don't. And I think it's important for us as practitioners and as scientists and as policymakers to, you know, not ignore the fact that while we may not be hitting our targets and while the costs are still high and while we're trying to optimize and efficiency-ize everything, we still need to keep in mind what's the real ask that we need, what's the real number that we need to protect folks, and how can we, you know, use data to inform those decisions.
Yeah, for the question on TRC, when we do TRC in a particular subunits or council or region, but at that particular year, we do not implement a school net distribution, because also according to WHO recommendation, if you do the TRC, because it be really massive, you can't also do the school net distribution. You are going to really overflow the number of net in a particular that might lead to an alternative use of ITNs. Also, for the alternative channel, for sure, for us, in terms of discrimination, we consider, because the net issued to ANC or EPI, the same thing, the same net is going to be issued at CTC or to elderly. So people can come out from the fertility heavy net, might be is from elderly or from the RSH or EPI. So there is no such discrimination so far we have observed. However, also for the
special groups at equity. For Tanzanians, health policy, it addressed that we should provide universal but equitable access. So for us, providing for this special group is like now we are attaining, we are going beyond, we are attaining the equitable. We want to achieve in all groups. That's why now we will even gain or got some more commitment from the political willings. And I just did mention on last Malaria World Day on this month, last month of April, for the first time, our Honorable Prime Minister will there be as a special guest because he congratulated us that we are now tailoring the intervention, not only to the one which we used to do. We are now considering special group like elderly. So it's like for us, becoming like a champion is giving our pushing us to be having a good agenda of malaria in the country. But for the case of question, in terms of the other household have attained net from EPI, ANC, and also from the school program. Here, we always encourage the sharing concept because you can find some of the children or the household has 5 children and then all of them, they get nets and the other nets and the other household do not have a school children. So we encourage the sharing concept. So by breaking this kind of some of people who do not like to share, that's why now we introduced other group than SchoolNet. That's why now we consider the people like elderly. So it's a kind of improvement or is an idea after doing an evaluation program of the SchoolNet, we saw some of the people who do not like to share the net. So we now go beyond the only SchoolNet, we go to other special group like this, the kind of champions. So for the quantification in terms of commercial, really, as I said, commercial is really doing as a commercial. We are now just providing enabling environment. We really get the numbers from the survey. So quantify the number of the untreated net for as NMCP, we are not doing this. So we are leaving the commercial to do as a commercial to see how better. Maybe on the way long to come, we do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to go for not 25 minutes, 20 minutes break because we have eaten into 5 and then we get back. In summary, our first presentation focused on the reality that coverage is not static. From the time we do a mass distribution, there is attrition from various sources and something needs to be done to prop up coverage. Of course, it needs some data, needs monitoring, and the method to choose needs to be such that it doesn't drive up costs. I think that is, and you have seen 5 options. I have considered this as an advocacy paper to open our mind because I saw the reactions. We want to keep where we are, but things are dynamic. There's a shortage of money. The option of industry making the net lasting longer it drives up costs. The option of people taking better care of it seems not feasible, but we are not giving up. So the other option is the delivery mechanism. So let's think about this in the coming years. The next presentation is about stratification. I know most of us have taken stratification in terms of epidemiological stratification, but you can see it can be by channel, it can be by demographic group, it can be by risk group, but all this needs information. Stratification practically means so many things, also other contextual things, like if there is another intervention, okay? So that came out very importantly. The issue of distribution vehicles or channel was expanded. I think a long time ago, we used to call it total market approach, right? Where the private sector is part of it, but where we just create the environment for them to operate. Social marketing was also, someone asked a question on it, but said, do you subsidize? I know we used to call that social marketing, right? but it was dropped. Is there still room for it? Does it have to be revisited? Because social marketing took care of the cost of distribution and increased the retention. Equity was brought in. I know Jessica was very excited being other programs. Yes, all this needs a lot of data, but we have so many mechanisms to do monitoring in the house on net coverage. The IRS programs collect that information. All other surveys collect that information. We are just simply not using it. It is available. Okay, and most of the channels we are thinking about is a matter of integration. The people having severe malaria, they are all treated with us. And in Uganda, we are also thinking about that channel. We are calling it smart discharge, because a person who has severe malaria means failed at prevention. And we will explore whether it is a net and issue them at that. And it's a good time for health promotion, because they are likely to pay attention, because they have had a near-death experience. And we have included this in our concept note, which we have just submitted. Thank you, everybody. 20 minutes, and we are right back here. I'm still in charge, so I'm going to get you back in 20 minutes. And thank you very much for the presenters. We really have to clap for them. They're out of the box and very challenging. So we are very happy about this. Thank you. So we could catch tea. We can even walk back with them, and we beat time. Remember, there's cocktail at 6 o'clock. We are not eating the time for the cocktail. Thank you.
Check control.
matatu manne.
Okay, sawa.
Kuna-
Watu ingie kwa booth.
Hapo ndani, kuna mtu. So just
Sawa. Check 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. Mic testing 1 2. Tuna test. 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Mic testing 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. Yeah. French color. 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. English French color. One two.
let me do the test. Rudi bado tujamaliza. It's on English. Test 1 2. Your phone. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Okay, no problem.
English loud and clear.
Thank you. English ndio iko na shida. It's test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Sasa mtisikize. Tunataka online. Online ndio wako na shida. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2 1 2 3 4 5. Iko clear? You can't hear me. We, hii simu weka kando kama haitusaidii.
Hebu ongea, unaweza jisikia.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test.
Wacha ni adjust, iko low. Iko low.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Sound ikienda chini ya particular laptop, hiyo sound nayo ina drop.
Inakuwa distorted. But
kuna time
Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Inatumia hapo.
So net, sometimes net kianguka, so hadi sound inaanguka.
Endo kunywa chai.
Tuendelee.
Nisha nataingia hapa afanye testing.
Just yourself. Mambo
Laban. Karada.
Leo.
Kairada. Edo. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Checking 1 2. Sound is good in French. And English. Testing 1 2. English channel. Can you go to the English channel? Can you go to the English channel?
Unaongea? Ongea. Check 1 2. Ulikuwa unamsikia vizuri?
Namsikia vizuri.
But sound iko low. Check 1, 2. Okay. Uko gani? French. French kidogo tu. Tuongea 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Unaongea? 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Endelea tu kuongea. 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. So namsikia zikiwa mbili. Unaona hiyo ndio shida nasema. Check 1, 2. Hebu test, unaongea? Unanisikia? Hebu ongea. Unasikia sauti zote mbili? Unasikia yake na yangu, si ndio?
Nasikia sauti moja.
Okay.
Nasikia tena nani kiongea loud and clear.
Check 1, 2. 1, 2.
Hii inakuja mara mbili.
Naongea. Unanisikia? 1, 2. Okay. Hata mimi nakusikia. 1, 2. Check 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 1, 2. 1, 2.
And we are back.
Yes.
Yes. Could we have the two groups of presenters up? I know Madagascar is a group, and they're going to speak in French, so please prepare your translating machines. We also have David of MCD Global Health. Thank you. And those managing the IT, I see this one is off. Okay, thank you. We are left with two presentations in the series of this subtopic of personalizing subnational tailoring. We are really looking at different approaches being tried by different projects and programs in achieving our goal of coverage while optimizing best use of resources. We are going to have the Madagascar team. I know the gentleman is first going to make some introduction to the fine lady, and then we continue thereafter. Please, you're welcome.
Again, with good evening, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Joelson, I'm technician or an MCP from Madagascar, and his name is Nirina from the PSA Madagascar. Nous excusons pour la présentation qui sera donc en français, puisque avant donc c'était en français que nous avons travaillé avec notre équipe. Donc nous sommes très ravis
d'être avec vous aux fonctions de l'AMP. Sans plus tarder, donc, le thème que nous allons vous présenter, c'est d'évaluer, faire une évaluation de la distribution continue à Madagascar. Et puis, l'accès des moustiquaires à un prix durable sur les zones où il y a l'épidémie élevée sur le paludisme. Et nous allons voir donc les tendances des indicateurs de paludisme ainsi que les coûts et les indicateurs liés à cette distribution des MID en base communautaire. Next. Le contexte, donc, pour Madagascar, depuis 2016, nous avons déjà adopté dans la stratégie du programme de lutte contre le paludisme une campagne de masse qui cible même. À cette stratégie globale, Madagascar a adopté aussi la stratégie de la distribution de la base communautaire et qui, je vous ai dit, est une contacté avec la campagne de masse. Cette distribution est coordonnée par le ministère de la Santé, mais c'est nous donc le programme national de lutte contre le paludisme qui joue le lead avec l'impact qui est financé par l'USAID PMI. C'est quoi donc la stratégie de base pour la distribution de lutte à Madagascar? Donc, elle est surtout donc focalisée au niveau de chaque ménage. Identifier les ménages qui ont des espaces couverts par une limite de la distribution dans la campagne de masse. Et puis, donc, au fond, le moustiquaire des espaces couverts. Et puis aussi, c'est de remplacer les qui sont déchirés. La définition d'endommagés ou déchirés, c'est que les utiliser, on peut plus les coudre. Donc, ça peut aller dans comme le trou, comme le grandeur de la tête. Voilà maintenant le choix des districts pour la distribution communautaire et surtout donc sur le district à transmission et qui a une séquence supérieure à 104 000 habitants. Ici, nous avons c'est de dire donc que stratégique de l'inspection intradomiciliaire avant, l'inspection de la section et stratégie donc la distribution des mythes. Il y a aussi le troisième choix, donc c'est pour le district avec la couverture sur l'étude de l'opportunité. C'est le district qui a couverture à 50%. La quatrième
critères de choix, donc, c'est pour l'artistique, ils ont enregistré actuellement, donc, nous avons enregistré un district. Lui, donc, c'est Tamatave. Maintenant, on va voir quelles sont les approches pour la distribution communautaire timide à Madagascar. Donc, il y a toujours quatre approches. La première, donc, c'est la mobilisation sociale renforcée. C'est-à-dire que l'organisation sociale ne se fait pas dans une seule vague, mais avant que les agents communautaires donc, qui font la visite à ménage, la visite à domicile, ils font déjà la sensibilisation sur la lutte contre le paludisme. Sur ces luttes qui nous vont message que il faut toujours après, lorsque faire attention à l'utilisation et surtout donc bien chrétien les moustiquaires. Deuxièmement, la stratégie approche c'est vraiment une contribution donc sensibilisant leurs parents à travers les messages clés les instituteurs donc partager sur l'utilisation. C'est surtout donc dans la place qui est concernée par cette stratégie d'approche enfant avec le directeur de l'école, les instituteurs. Troisièmement, donc, des structures communautaires. Déjà, dans le comité de santé, au sein au niveau du centre de santé de base, qui a déjà un système mis en place il y a longtemps. C'est cette fois-ci par le comité de gestion des luttes. Donc, c'est l'approche ici, c'est Madagascar, puisque la gestion des luttes, cette fois-ci, donc, ce sera géré par le comité de gestion qui a c'est eux qui font de la activité. Sur la qui reste donc visite à domicile jusqu'à l'acquisition des stickers et villageois. Et là, donc, c'est un système qui est très, très efficace maintenant, puisque déjà, l'organisation, madame, se présenter les résultats, c'est vraiment un succès dans l'existence sur au niveau de la communauté. Le système logistique utilisé l'approvisionnement, donc, c'est un système, c'est vraiment la qui prend donc qui cherche sur le système de points d'approvisionnement et puis District. Et c'est juste donc, c'est juste donc au niveau de financement par rapport au transport de ces modes et le stockage qui avec les partenaires. Voici donc le schéma de la mise en œuvre. Je peux chaque obligation, mais sur la gauche, tout simplement, donc, nous avons vu une structure de coordination centrale jusqu'au niveau communautaire. Et ça passe donc au niveau de région, district ou commune. Et au niveau du site, c'est de temps renouvelé sur les structures. Il y a toujours de la structure de coordination maintenant qui est mise en place. Et puis donc, sur la droite, nous pouvons voir que là, il y a les acteurs de la mise en œuvre. C'est tout à fait que c'est la ministère de la Santé publique qui livre l'activité, mais en collaboration avec le ministère de l'Éducation nationale et le partenaire aussi avec Impact, structure, directeur, national. C'est pareil aussi pour le ministère de l'Éducation nationale. Donc, c'est en parallèle, il y a des techniciens qui font toujours des réunions, assurent toujours la coordination de la mise en œuvre de l'activité. Sur la partie le partenaire qui est le CID PMI avec Impact, c'est surtout donc montrer que le système d'approvisionnement, le circuit d'approvisionnement, il y a donc des niveaux centrales, et ça passe par le parc, là où il y a des stockages au niveau district, et les PIA, le stockage au niveau communal. L'objectif, donc, sur cette stratégie de mise en œuvre, c'est d'approvisionner les ménages par le lead. Maintenant, la présentation, je vais vous parler brièvement concernant le mécanisme de la distribution lead à travers cette stratégie de distribution de lead communautaire à base communautaire. Donc, il y a deux systèmes en parallèle. En fait, donc, il y a, comme j'ai énoncé tout à l'heure, l'identification des espaces de couchage non couverts par le lead, qui sera donc assuré par l'agent communautaire et le mobilisateur. Ça va signifier vraiment l'espace de couchage. Et si jamais donc on trouve des espaces non couverts, nous allons partager des coupons pour récupérer donc les leads, les dates précis de la distribution. En fait, donc, pour la distribution, c'est quand même en concertation avec la population donc, qui ont décidé et la date de la distribution de la lead. Sur le donc on les alcools, il y a une activité pour faire encore les enfants à l'école. C'est donc qui fait l'exercice d'avoir le ménage en si les enfants donc qui verront avec leurs parents, ils vont parler et après donc aller chercher de la libre qu'on appelle de distribution. Et on fait cette distribution donc chaque ménage inscrit qui ont déjà le coupon vont chercher le Bible auprès des associés ou bien des agents communautaires, des agents distributeurs. C'est d'avoir l'image qui peut nous soumettre protéger le terrorisme. Si donc, sachez mon intervention, je vous remercie et je passe ma parole à mon collègue. Je vous remercie.
Merci de m'avoir donné la parole. À tous, bonjour. Ma présentation se porte sur les réalisations, l'impact, les défis et les bonnes pratiques et surtout les coûts de la mise en œuvre durant la période. Mais tout d'abord, permettez-moi de rappeler et souligner que les réalisations que je vais vous partager, c'est grâce à l'engagement du ministère de la Santé en collaboration avec le ministère de l'Éducation nationale, avec l'appui technique et financier des partenaires et des donneurs. Tout d'abord, je vais parler des réalisations par rapport aux structures au niveau communautaire. Comme chiffre clé, 1949 comités de gestion composés de 11 796 acteurs communautaires ont été mis en place et fonctionnels. 799 446 ménages ont bénéficié des messages clés sur la prévention du paludisme et l'utilisation correcte des langues à travers les visites à domicile. Et enfin, 69 164 élèves dans la classe de 8e au niveau des 3087 écoles ont contribué dans la réalisation de la mise en œuvre de la DCC par la CIP au niveau école. Par rapport à la logistique, nous allons voir les graphes sur le tableau. Par rapport à 100% prévu à acheminer au niveau district, 80% des NID sont reçus au niveau district dans les points d'approvisionnement communautaire et 100% de ces NID sont récupérés par les comités de gestion appelés COMLEI. S'agissant de la distribution, par rapport aux 786 900 NID reçus au niveau des comités de gestion, 786 281 distribués. On constate alors 12 492 coupons non échangés par des NID qui est dû à l'absence des moments qui est due à la non-récupération de nids par les ménages. Tout d'abord, par la suite, je vais parler de la communication, mais permettez-moi de vous montrer les réalisations avant les supports. Comme réalisation, 2 264 303 visites à domicile effectuées par les agents communautaires mobilisateurs. Ceci couvre, nous touchons les ménages dans les 12 districts d'intervention. Si en sachant que la communication interpersonnelle au niveau communautaire se répartit en 3 étapes. Le F1, qui est la première sensibilisation effectuée par les agents communautaires mobilisateurs lors de la VAD et en identifiant les espaces de couchage non couverts. La F2, c'est la sensibilisation réalisée par les agents communautaires mobilisateurs lors de la distribution ou la récupération des nids par les ménages. Et la F3, c'est la sensibilisation après la récupération des nids lors de la distribution. Si le diagramme montre que 35% de F1 réalisé, 34% de F2 réalisé et 31% de F3 réalisé. À présent, je vais attirer votre attention sur l'impact de ces réalisations des efforts de la mise en œuvre en évaluant la tendance sur l'incidence et le nombre de cas confirmés du paludisme. Si le tableau montre que par rapport à l'incidence du paludisme, dans les zones est et est à haute transmission, l'incidence est en tendance croissante et dans les zones ouest et subdésertiques, la tendance est stable. Par rapport au cas du paludisme confirmé, c'est pareil. Dans les zones est en haute transmission, la tendance des cas confirmés augmente et la tendance dans les zones ouest et sud désertiques diminue. Maintenant, nous allons voir la tendance de la possession et de l'utilisation de l'huile. Par rapport à la possession, 69% des ménages possèdent au moins une huile. 30% des ménages possèdent au moins une nid, pardon. S'agissant de la tendance de l'utilisation, d'après les enquêtes qu'on a fait, 77% des femmes enceintes interviewées dorment dans les nids tous les nuits, tandis que 76% des enfants moins de 5 ans interrogés dorment dans les nids toutes les nuits. Qu'en est-il de la coût? C'est l'analyse de coût dépenses réelles s'élèvent à 1 528,24 $, qui est dans les transport et stockage, ainsi que les ressources humaines absorbent la plupart des budgets, qui est de 47% pour le transport et stockage et 31% pour les ressources humaines. En sachant que 82% des dépenses, c'est la contribution du bonheur et 18% la contribution du gouvernement. Tout de même, nous avons relevé des succès ou bonnes pratiques. Quelques bonnes pratiques comme la diminution des risques de disparition des mythes, l'efficacité de recensement en utilisant les coupons, l'implication de chaque entité à tous les niveaux, les encadrements, conscientisation des acteurs communautaires auprès des ménages ou auprès de la communauté, l'utilisation du système unique pour la collecte de données, c'est dans le système DHIS2. Et la formation, malgré le contexte COVID, on a pu réaliser les formations, plus particulièrement la formation de l'équipe opérationnelle, les techniciens accompagnateurs et le superviseur des techniciens accompagnateurs. Parmi les bonnes pratiques aussi, la bonne application des enfants, des élèves de la classe de 8e dans la mise en œuvre de la DCC, qui a impacté sur la motivation de tout le monde à avoir des mythes. On a aussi relevé des défis comme la suspension des activités avec, au niveau des écoles, pendant le COVID-19. Les retards relatifs à l'arrivée, à l'envoi de monde qui engendre un coût additionnel et l'incompréhension de la population des critères d'éligibilité ou les critères d'obtention des NID au niveau communautaire et dernièrement, la mauvaise qualité de la connexion qui retarde la saisie des données dans le système de DHIS2. Après la mise en œuvre de la DCC, on a organisé un atelier de capitalisation avec la présence des représentants de chaque acteur. Quelques recommandations issues de cet atelier, comme la continuité, le renforcement de supervision, c'est-à-dire d'augmenter, de renforcer la descente sur terrain pour voir une vue, la réalité sur terrain et prévoir un plan de mitigation pour la continuité de l'activité lors du contexte COVID. Renforcement de l'utilisation du pool. C'est le règlement interne approuvé par la communauté en cas de mésusage de NID. Et dernièrement, étendre cette stratégie de la DCC dans les zones ou districts dans l'incidence, forte incidence et enclavée. Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, ma présentation. Mais permettez-moi, avant de prendre ma place, d'adresser mes remerciements au ministère de la Santé, au ministère de l'Éducation nationale, ainsi que les partenaires, les bailleurs qui ont contribué dans la réussite de cette activité. À vous tous, merci.
Thank you. You realize I allowed longer time. Another very interesting presentation. Earlier, we said we are challenged by how to maintain coverage. One way is to increase the nets we give out. The other is to invest in getting the communities to keep them. I had they spend up to $1 million. Maybe I missed it from the translation, whether how much per net that one is. So we shall ask questions later and make a judgment which is the best way. We still have one more presentation. If you could make it snappy and we gain some time. Thank you.
Yes, I will do my best to keep this brief if possible. So my name is David Garrick. I am with MCD Global Health based in Equatorial Guinea, where I'm supporting the Bioko Island Malaria Elimination Project, or BMEP for short. And today I'm going to be talking a bit, kind of giving another example, like we've heard from many teams about how different countries are adapting nets, strategies for nets and other malaria control strategies to fit their context. So I'm going to be giving another example of this on Bioko Island in Equatorial Guinea, but I'll try to focus a bit more on the process. And in doing so, maybe give us some ideas about how to frame discussions as we move forward, thinking about data for decision-making in general. So first, a bit of overview of the BMEP. The BMEP is a public-private partnership in Equatorial Guinea, funded to control and ultimately eliminate malaria from Bioko Island. And we've been implementing intensive malaria control since 2004. Initially, and for much of the period, we've seen very good returns on those investments, prevalence going down from more than 40% in 2004 to around 12% in 2016, 2017. But in the years since, we've seen prevalence plateau and even go up in a few of the recent years. So this poses a question, which I think we're also now starting to face at a global level, which we saw in the presentation this morning, of how much can we really expect to continue declining malaria doing what we've been doing, given the trends we see, for example, here in Bioko Island. We have a problem that probably we can't keep doing what we were doing and expect to see continued declines. So most of this presentation is about our response to that situation. So I'll first talk a bit about what I mean by adaptive management and adaptive decision-making, then go into a bit of details about the systems we use in Bioko Island, and give an example of using this adaptive management concept for nets in Bioko Island, and finish with some general comments about adapting malaria control strategies. That said, I want to stress that this kind of approach is by no means limited to the tools or the context that I'm talking about. I'm talking about them because that's where I have experience. That's what I can use as essentially a motivating example. So when I talk about adaptive management, what do I mean? Adaptive management is a concept that comes from the ecology literature, actually. And the idea essentially is that we have to make decisions all of the time at an operational level, and we never have perfect information. So we have to make decisions based on the best information we have, making the best decisions at the time, given what we know. And adaptive management is a way of thinking about how do we structure decision-making such that each time we have to make a decision, we can improve on the previous decision. And the core idea here is that iteratively, we update our understanding about the problem, about the tools we can use, and also characterizing what we don't know, use that information to plan and implement. And then the information we gain from monitoring and evaluating interventions as we're doing them or after we do them has to go back into a reassessment of our problem, reassessment of how effective are the tools we have, and making a new decision, hopefully an improved decision about what we're going to do. So on Bioko Island, what we've used to implement this is first an iterative situational analysis of malaria on Bioko Island, of the tools we have and potential approaches we can use. This is primarily based on our annual malaria indicator survey, but also includes data from operational data. Those analyses then inform our implementation of activities. And while we're doing activities and while we evaluate them, we use a robust system based on a digital data collection platform called Campaign Information Management System, or CIMS, which is something that MCD developed with partners for the Bioko Island context. Data from CIMS then goes into data visualizations to form a spatial decision support system, which ultimately goes into decision making. And then essentially this process repeats itself. Every time there's a new decision to make, essentially, this is a process that needs to be happening. So a bit about the tools we're using on Bioko Island. First, the motivation, the reason that MCD decided to develop CIMS is essentially twofold. First, we needed accurate denominators. Bioko Island is a highly urban context. Around 80% of our population lives in the capital city of Malabo. And this introduces some difficulties in terms of deployment planning if we don't have a way to uniquely identify a household. Also, of course, denominators are crucial for any kind of coverage estimation. And if we don't have a good denominator, if we don't really know how many people live in this area, then it's difficult to say what coverage was. And if it's difficult to say what coverage was, it's difficult to say how effective was this intervention, because we won't know if the problem was operational or if the problem is that the intervention is not having an impact. The other main motivation for CIMS was to digitize, centralize, and standardize data collection. Digitize so that the time necessary between getting data and analyzing data is reduced, and centralize and standardize so that the number of processes that we need to use on a field level is reduced, and also so that we can link data from different kinds of activities to generate new insights. Now, CIMS itself is essentially based on two core components. The first is a grid of Bioko Island. So here you see a map of Bioko Island. Again, up here is the capital city of Malabo, where around 80% of the population live. So we split Bioko Island into map areas, which are 1 by 1 kilometer square grid cells. And then each of those we split again into 100 map sectors, which are 100 meters by 100 meters. And we use the areas and sectors to assign unique household identifiers, creating a household database, which then is updated in a way that's integrated to the way we deploy field activities. And that's an important thing to note, because it's necessary to limit the amount of effort necessary to upkeep a system like this. The other main component of CIMS is data collection backend, which is very similar to any other system that I think anyone in this room is using. Here, it's based on ODK. So we have a system to create data collection forms, download the forms to tablets, use them for offline data collection, send data to a server, and connect the server to real-time dashboards, so we can use them when we need to make decisions. I'll talk just a little bit about how using this system has changed the way we operate. The first is that we now use sectors as our unit for deployment, whatever the intervention is or activity is. And we also use sectors to measure coverage at an operational level and measure operationally whether we're reaching our targets. And that's important because when we use sectors instead of, for example, an administrative unit, it allows us and encourages us to have a more equitable distribution of coverage across a larger administrative unit. And so that is what this plot here is showing. There are 4 hypothetical examples of different ways to cover an administrative unit at around 80% coverage. I won't go into too much detail in the interest of time, but this 4th example is the case when we use sectors as the main way to determine where we're working. So we have also used this kind of SIMS system, spatial decision support system, to update the way we sample for our surveys. So we now have primary sampling units that are based on map areas divided into 2 strata. So this map on the left is showing where the primary sampling units are and which strata they belong to. And this allows us to disaggregate a bit, for example, prevalence among strata, but we can also look at other indicators that help us determine if different activities make more sense or less sense to do in different types of places. So moving on to the particular example of LLINs, a bit of history first. Bioko Island has had 3 mass distributions in 2007, 2015, and 2018. We also had 2 top-up campaigns, and during this whole period, have done continuous distribution of nets to pregnant women at ANC. Now, for our 2021 LLIN distribution strategy, which was initially planned as another mass distribution across Bioko Island, instead of performing that, we adapted our strategy to limit the mass distribution only outside of urban Malabo, and in urban Malabo, open fixed distribution points. So this is a way to adapt our strategy in order to use resources more efficiently. And now I'm going to be talking a bit about some of the analyses that went into making that decision. So overall, Bioko Island has relatively low net use. When we've done a mass distribution in 2015 and 2018, net use goes up, but even then it goes back down pretty quickly in the next year, and the highest we've seen is barely over 50%, which, as we know, is not where we want to be. What are the reasons for that? One important reason is loss of nets. Because of the way we have structured our data systems, we're able to link household data from our distribution to household data from surveys. And doing that, we can calculate the loss of nets in the period of time before the first survey after the distribution. So in this case, what I'm showing is, what I'm showing is the percentage of nets which disappeared in the approximately 4 months between the 2018 mass distribution and the 2018 MIS. And overall, it's very high, almost 40%. It does vary somewhat in different areas, but in almost all areas of the island, it's quite high. There are many causes for this. One important cause may be that folks are giving nets to other people who live in higher transmission areas. For example, the continental region of Equatorial Guinea. But we also see some creative uses of nets, like these boys playing football. And we also see a lot of nets winding up in the trash. And again, this is within only a few months after a distribution. In the first year after the distribution, there's even more loss of nets. So between the 2018 and 2019 MIS data sets, we see an additional decline in net access, pretty much across the island, but somewhat exacerbated in urban Malabo. In general, this is telling us that if we do a mass distribution, probably within a year to a year and a half, a very large proportion of those nets will no longer be in the community. We may not know exactly where they are, But it's pretty clear that they're no longer in the community where we had distributed them to, or at least not being used for the purposes we hope they would be. In general, then, the situation for LLINs in Bioko is that we have a highly urban population. So if we do a mass distribution, most of the work is in Malabo. And our indicators from previous distributions, previous surveys, are telling us that many nets that we distribute in Malabo are unlikely to ever be used. So the conclusion from this is that even though we know nets are effective, and we have a lot of evidence from this from Bioko, from many other contexts as well, that nets are protective if you use them. But that does not mean that a mass distribution is always the best use of resources. So the question now becomes for Bioko, can we effectively distribute nets to people who actually are going to use them in Malabo without a mass distribution? And the answer to that gets into how we are now adapting our malaria control strategies in Bioko. So to address those issues that I've been talking about of nets in Malabo, we decided to open six distribution points in the city. And those are health facilities that had been previously doing ANC distribution, but now the eligibility for receiving a net was expanded so that anyone who wanted a net could get one. Of course, a very important part of changing that strategy was also adapting our communication strategy to get the word out to the population, to raise awareness that nets are available in these locations, and also to reinforce messaging when folks are coming and receiving nets. Now, an important aspect of this kind of adaptive decision-making paradigm is that even though we made a decision to open these 6 distribution points, we need to continue to monitor whether they're doing what we think they should. And so at a level of kind of a more operational level, we saw in the first year of having these fixed points that distributed the vast majority of nets, and the other 4 were much less effective at getting nets to the population. Based on that, we decided in 2022 to only keep these 2 higher, more effective distribution sites open and close the remaining 4. That said, this is a decision based on the information we have now or at this time, and there remains a need to continue to evaluate whether that strategy continues to be the best strategy. Because as we gain more information, as time goes on, we gain more information about what this strategy, what this adaptation of our strategy, change in our strategy is doing. And it may be that new information comes that will require us to change that decision. So we need to be open to those possibilities and make sure we're continuously evaluating what we have decided to do and adapt if necessary. Now, at a level of net access and net use, opening distribution points, fixed distribution points in Malabo, if we look at net access here, population access spatially, we don't see much change in 2021, 2022 compared to previous years. But that's not particularly surprising because these distribution points are not really targeting nets spatially. We hope, targeting nets, giving nets to people who are highly likely to, more highly likely to use them. So we can actually do an analysis to see if that is the case. To do that, we looked at areas that did not have any distributions from 2019 to 2022. This is the plot on the top right. And what we saw is big declines in access and use from 2018 to 2019. But from 2019 use, which is here the black line, remains pretty steady from 2019 to 2022, despite no community distributions, while access, which is in yellow here, does decline a bit. As a result, our ratio from use to access, which is blue here, is increasing somewhat. That's somewhat indicative of nets going to people who are using them more than broader distribution. But we can also directly compare households that have a net from a fixed distribution point or have a net that they reported getting from a fixed distribution point and households that have nets only from other sources. And when we do that, what we see is on the left here are households with a net from a distribution point, and they have a significantly higher net use than households with nets only from other sources. So overall, what this is telling us is that it appears that the strategy is doing what we thought it would. That is giving nets to people who are more likely to use them. An important aspect of this adaptation of the strategy, though, is that we were able to maintain net access in areas without community distributions using a vastly reduced level of effort. And because of that, we were able to reallocate resources that were initially tagged for a mass distribution to be able to provide other types of protection. And these other types of protection also, of course, are, at least some of them, are going to provide protection to people who are not likely to use a net, even if we give it to them. So for example, in this time period that I'm talking about, we were able to expand the implementation of IRS so that all of Malabo was covered with IRS in 2021 and 2022. And we've also begun piloting other interventions, other activities to support IRS nets and everything else that we're doing, such as a larger scale implementation of larval source management in Malabo, outreach to pregnant women to reinforce protection during pregnancy, expanding entomological surveillance, and others. So taking a step back, this has all been a fairly specific example of an adaptation of a strategy of net distribution on Bioko Island. But more broadly, this adaptive management framework, a way of thinking about how to use data for decision-making, gives us first of all, gives us a way to think about tailoring interventions at a subnational level, whatever that means for different contexts. And in doing so, it also helps us improve the optimization of use of resources for malaria control. An important aspect, though, that I'm certainly not the first person to say even today, is that decisions about use of resources are not based only on what is the direct benefit of a particular activity. For example, we know that nets provide protection if people use them. And we even know that if we do a mass distribution for some probably relatively short period of time, net use will go up. So there is definitely a benefit to doing a mass distribution, but there's probably a greater benefit to shifting those resources to other activities. And finally, I just want to reiterate that when we're thinking about using data for decision-making, adaptive management, responding to the challenges that are presenting themselves in our particular situations, and we all have them, we need to remember that any decision we make is not a forever decision. A decision we make is a decision based on the best information we have at the time, until and unless other information comes that tells us that it is not a good decision. And what that means is we need to be continuously reevaluating, monitoring what we're doing, reevaluating whether the choices we've made are the right choices. And hopefully operating in that way can help us improve the impact we're having and get us to where we want to be. So with that, I would just like to thank everyone who has contributed to this work, particularly everyone at the BMAP team in Equatorial Guinea and our partners and donors. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. One of my very interesting topics is exactly 5 p.m. I know most people switch over at that time. We still have some 15 minutes for wrap up and 45 minutes gap to prepare for the cocktail, so we can eat into a few of those. I think let's take very few questions and we we hand to the secretariat to wrap up. Do they exist anyway? Okay, one. Those moving the microphones, please stand where there's no order. There's no, okay, start. And then take to the others. Please make them quick, short. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Donatien Kambwe from Catholic Relief Services in Guinea. I start with Madagascar team. Merci l'équipe de Madagascar pour la bonne présentation. C'est une bonne stratégie à laquelle plusieurs pays réfléchissent. On a besoin quand même d'apprendre de votre expérience pour avoir un certain nombre d'informations pouvant aider à relancer les discussions dans une certaine mesure. Vous avez parlé du système logistique. Est-ce que vous pouvez expliquer un peu l'unité de planification? Donc, lorsque vous évaluez, vous estimez les besoins en moustiquaires pour l'approche communautaire, quelle est l'unité que vous utilisez pour comme hypothèse de quantification? C'est le ménage, c'est la couchette ou c'est le nombre de personnes dans le ménage? Donc, cela pourra vraiment aider à... Un autre élément, vous avez parlé du système logistique également, de mécanismes de distribution. Mais pour revenir à la présentation de Molly, une présentation très instructive que nous avons eue ici, il serait bien de parler aussi du système suivi-évaluation, de cette approche. Peut-être que ça n'apparaît pas peut-être clairement. Comment est fait la collecte des données, le rapportage avant la saisie dans le DHSD? Donc, ce processus pourra permettre de voir comment, comme l'a dit Molly tout à l'heure, comment nous pouvons utiliser ces données de routine pour pouvoir maintenir le suivi des indicateurs épidémiologiques ou programmatiques liés à la lutte contre le paludisme.
Okay, we are not going to allow you a second one, please.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question.
Okay, good day. Can I go ahead?
Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
All right, so Ndoka is my name. I have a quick question. I've listened intently to all the presentations, and I just want to pose this question. The temperature, in other words, the weather pattern at the place, at the location where implementation is planned, whatever ITN activity, is that taken into consideration in the various country programs while planning their campaign? And I ask this because, some literature speak of the optimal storage temperatures, some 25 degrees centigrade to 33.4. So if you're implementing in locations where you have temperatures going to 40, more than 35, as we see in several of our countries. So I'd like to find out if this is factored in when planning the campaigns. Thank you.
Okay, next, yeah.
Thanks. So I have one question for each group. Thank you to all the presenters for the excellent presentations. First, for Madagascar, the illustration of the process of the community distribution indicated that there might be a small crowd at the distribution point. And I just wanted to clarify, are the nets given out sort of one by one as people approach the distribution agent, or is there a sort of, I don't know, weekly or monthly distribution where there's a number of nets given out to people with coupons? And then I missed how old the children in class 8 are. Sorry if I missed that, I'm curious. And then for the BMAP presentation, at the distribution points, or even during the previous mass campaigns, did you have a way to link the nets that were going out to the individuals or being picked up, I suppose, to their unique household ID. I wasn't sure if there was a linkage directly there, or then if you just capture the access and use in the annual MIS, which would be amazing to have everywhere else. But thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. We are done. Please, let's take up the questions. Oh, one more? Okay.
Merci à l'équipe de Madagascar. J'avais une question rapide. Vous avez parlé de plus de 700 000 ménages ayant reçu le message sur l'utilisation des moustiquaires. Dans nos campagnes, on a beaucoup de défis par rapport à la communication. Donc, je voulais comprendre l'approche qui a été utilisée et est-ce que c'est durant la distribution que les messages ont été véhiculés ou bien il y a une approche en dehors de la distribution? Merci.
Perfect. Let's take up the questions quickly.
Oui, merci beaucoup pour les questions. Donc, je vais essayer de répondre sur trois points. Donc, premièrement, donc pour la question au niveau, est-ce qu'il y a des températures optimales exigées avant de faire la campagne? En fait, donc, à Madagascar, c'est plutôt donc par rapport à la saison de pluie, puisque là-bas, donc, la plupart des sites pour la distribution des mides, la route est vraiment difficile et la stratégie est toujours donc de faire l'envoi de ces moustiquaires avant la période de pluie. Mais il n'y a pas vraiment donc ce paramètre de température qui limite la distribution, mais surtout la période de pluie qui est à éviter. Et pour la stratégie de la DCC, donc, les quelques personnes qui est dans le communauté, la communauté, les agents au niveau de la communauté, donc, il y a les 3 agents communautaires qui travaillent déjà avec le comité de santé au niveau communal. Et puis, il y a un agent communautaire distributeur. Et puis, les chefs de village ou des chefs Fouktan. Donc, c'est lorsque ces agents-là ont collecté donc les espaces de couchage non couverts, c'est-à-dire donc les 2 mobilisateurs qui effectuera la mobilisation et qui collectent les espaces de couchage non couverts, ils donnent des rendez-vous et jusque-là donc c'est tous les mois qu'on fait la distribution dans un endroit fixe décidé par la communauté même. Et pour les enfants, donc c'est vraiment la stratégie au niveau école qui véhicule les messages et ces enfants-là donc qui vont porter des informations au niveau de leurs enseignants. Et puis les agents communautaires vont vérifier l'exactitude des informations émanant de ces enfants-là et puis donner des coupons et revenir donc après avec le coupon au niveau de la site de distribution. Et pour le 3e point, donc, quand est-ce que le message est véhiculé, comme j'ai énoncé pendant ma présentation, donc, là, c'est vraiment un système qui est adopté par Madagascar, la mobilisation sociale renforcée. Donc, c'est vraiment pendant le visite à domicile, les agents ou les groupes de communauté donc fait déjà la communication, la sensibilisation sur l'utilisation des moustiquaires, sur la lutte contre le paludisme, et puis l'entretien de ces moustiquaires. Et puis pendant la distribution même, et après la distribution, c'est-à-dire donc dans toutes les phases de la distribution, donc il y a toujours la mobilisation sociale. Je vous remercie.
Yeah,
Finally,
to respond to the question about linking nets to household IDs, when we did mass distributions, we were able to link the number of nets distributed to a household ID. For the fixed distribution points, that's not possible.
okay, thank you. As Jason comes to take over, just wrapping points from me. Earlier when I was younger and I went to school, I learned from Darwin that it is not the intelligent species which survive, but those adaptive to change. I'm not an anthropologist, but I don't know whether they are right. You need intelligence to adapt to changes, isn't it? So actually those adaptive are intelligent in the first place. Now, having looked the last presentation, actually adaptive management wrapped all the other three we looked at before. Before the concept of adaptive management came in the malaria realm, we were used to continuous improvement, which was plan, do, check, act. But you checked outcomes, you improved processes. Okay, there is no real paradigm shift. You check outcomes, you improve the processes, because that is how continuous improvement is built. But in adaptive management, you may not only change processes, you may change strategies and options of investment. So we saw one that focused on different distribution outlets. We saw one which focused on strengthening use, okay, and we saw one earlier by the approach, the 5 approaches Dr. Hannah brought up. I think let's take this further during the cocktail we think about. I think the purpose here is we see need for being adaptive. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity, and apologies for being 10 minutes late. It is un-African to interrupt. So we normally tolerate when time is not kept. It is a cultural issue. And for the presenters, thank you very much.
Good. I would like to actually welcome the team from Uganda to come up. I just wanted to thank Dr. Jimmy and thank the presenters from our last session. And just a reminder, the cocktail at Oriane, where's the cocktail? Is it right out here or is it downstairs? It's on the second floor.
Second floor, poolside garden, like the green area next to the pool.
Okay, so the cocktail will be downstairs starting at 6 o'clock at the pool. I'd like to remind people we will start tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp, and the session will be ITN quality and performance. But just quickly, today, Dr. Jimmy Lapigo spent a really important birthday with us, and actually was the most active member, I think, of this meeting. And I think what we've seen in him is someone who's both intelligent and very adaptive in his first 50 years. So Jimmy, we are just, there's a little cake coming out. It's coming out very slowly. It's creeping, and your team, does the team want to come up, and we're going to sing Jimmy a happy birthday? Do you guys want to come up on the stage? Just so we can, do you want to come up on the stage? And does anyone have a camera? Because it's actually a very nice cake. It says happy 50th Jimmy, so that's quite sweet. Okay, you ready? Do you guys want to take the lead? You're beautiful singers, I assume.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Jimmy. Then we can sing it. Happy birthday, Jimmy. Happy birthday, Jimmy. Happy birthday, dear Jimmy.
How old are you now? How old are you now? How old are you now? 60 years old. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Congratulations. Happy birthday.
No, I did. Yeah.